There was one mysterious place in the world where all who wished could undergo trials and become much stronger than they were before. The people who decided to embark on this journey were very excited, realizing that their adventure would start from here. They realized that it could be dangerous, but despite the risks, they wanted to achieve their goals in life. One of these daredevils turned out to be our protagonist named Dylan. He was a cheerful and good-natured fellow who realized that he had come to this place to keep a promise made to his father. Soon, they all met a real guide who was ready to teach the newly arrived players. He told them of a staircase wall at the end of the world, at the top of which you can get anything you want. The guide stood in front of the people and said, "And they must have traveled a long way to get to this place." He congratulates them on having overcome this initial stage. He then decided to elaborate on the location. The first step and the first location of the stairwell is a high-level pawn, and he will be responsible for conducting the trial at this level. The guide also introduced himself. His name is Kyle, and he will be introduced to all of them throughout the trials. Kyle continued that surely they had all heard the rumors that whoever reached the end and received the gift of knowledge would be able to fulfill their every wish. That's probably why each of them had traveled this long way, to reach the end of the world. And though the end of the stair wall has not yet been reached, added the lad, that they may be the first to reach it. So they, the guides, have high hopes for them all. Kyle raised his hand and said, whether the stories were true or not, he wouldn't be able to say for sure. But only the player who gets to the end will know that wish fulfillment really exists, the guide added. He would like to believe that the day when they would know the answer would come. So he would not tell them any stories, for it was pointless. After those words, Kyle snapped his fingers and the first test began. The guide soared into the air, much to the surprise of all present. They had never seen a man able to fly before. Everyone thought it was crazy, and one of the guys even expressed out loud his surprise at what was happening. He totally didn't expect to see something like that right in front of him. The thing is, the challenge didn't start with a great boss, but with a monster that people had to defeat to advance to the next level. The terrifying monster was coming closer and closer to them, and no one understood why they should fight such a creature. Kyle explained, the first stage test should be at least at that level of difficulty so those can move on. Then he asked, did they really hope that the challenge to fulfill any of your wishes would be easy? If not, let me introduce you to the dragon hunt, the guide continued. That his time is unlimited, and he can spend as long as it takes to destroy this monster. As many people as you want can go to the next level. There is no limit. Just defeat this dragon. Kyle hoped that someone present would start acting right now, immediately. After all, even though there was no time limit, it would be nice if someone would start the trial already. All the people were in shock and bewilderment, not realizing what kind of monster was in front of them, and whether this guide was crazy to want them to fight a dragon of such a huge size. One of the guys realized, damn it, one wrong move and they'd all surely die in that place. But no matter how it went down, one of them had to start. Perhaps it's just a disguised trial in the guise of a dragon. The people were confused, not knowing whether to attack or defend themselves. But soon, they decided to act. However, the dragon was even more formidable than they thought. Anyone who tried to attack it was blown away by the wind generated by the beast itself. Kyle began to feel bad for the people, seeing how they were needlessly wasting their lives. But he couldn't intervene, as it was against the rules. One of the guys realized that just a little more, and he could do something against this monster. The young man was going to try to defeat the dragon and pass the test, so he immediately rushed forward. As he tried to strike the monster with his sword, he realized that he was unlikely to succeed now. As soon as the guy tried to strike the dragon with his weapon, the sword immediately broke and its shards scattered in different directions. Kyle could see without a doubt that all the people were trying their best, but they were succeeding rather strangely. The guide said regretfully, how sad it is to watch such struggles. It seems that no one will pass the test again this year, as in previous years. The boy wondered, when will the day come when we will have talents capable of slaying the greatest dragon? Perhaps it would be the same guys that God Lyrid himself had spoken of. Despite the people's best efforts, their attempts to defeat the majestic dragon remained futile. The monster easily threw its scales, made up of tough stones, at them, which were not easy to dodge. One of the young men hit by this hit was in trouble. He realized that he could no longer get back on track, and it looked like it was the end for him. But suddenly, the girl shouted to him, "Move aside!" She immediately wanted to stand up for the guy, doing everything she could to keep him out of harm's way. The young man was extremely surprised and couldn't understand who this mysterious beauty who protected him was. Lowering her blade, the girl said, "Let him pull himself together and get out of there. He's too weak to be in those ruins." The guy immediately apologized to her. "I'm sorry, since I really didn't mean to set him up." But the girl wouldn't listen to his excuses and immediately lunged at the dragon. She pushed off the ground to jump as high as she could to get a better look at the beast. It was a good view, but the dragon seemed even bigger. She didn't care, though. She believed she could pass the test. After all, she was confident in her strength and believed that she was capable of defeating any monster in her path. After all, she was not an ordinary person, as many people might think. The girl tried to strike the monster with her katana so that it would feel all her passion for battle. At this moment, the dragon felt the incredible damage inflicted upon it for the first time. The beast immediately swished its tail, preparing to strike back at the impertinent girl. The woman realized that she should be on her guard now, for it seemed to be the first time the dragon had sensed the danger coming from her. When the monster tried to hit her with its tail, someone suddenly appeared right in front of her. The girl didn't realize what was wrong. It turned out to be quite simple. A guy who managed to learn how to control magic came to her rescue. Using his abilities, he was able to hold back the dragon's tail and then struck the giant. The young man realized that he now had to demonstrate all the skills he had acquired over a long period of time as an ordinary boy. The girl actually said, "Not bad, but she could have done it herself." Kyle was amazed. "Wow, that's amazing. Looks like there was some talent this year after all." He hadn't seen a dragon give him this much trouble in a long time. The monster, having looked at these people, began to move more cautiously, realizing that among them there are bugs capable of inadvertently overpowering him. The guide began to realize that these two were showing great promise and might be able to pass the test. The main character, Dylan, added, "There really are a lot of incredible people to meet on the stairwell wall." He looked at the boy and wondered, could he really find a trio that could defeat this dragon? It was just a guess, though. The monster roared at full power, realizing that he should show his full strength now if he wanted to survive. After that angry roar, all the people on the ground fell, and a torrent of wind threw them right back against the wall. But Dylan, unlike the others, had no problem being able to stay on his feet and accept this flow, going against it. Kyle looked at this guy and clearly realized that he was definitely going to be unusual, just like the rest of them. The young man asked if he could join the others. Soon he was already approaching everyone very quickly, realizing that he was about to show off his abilities. The guy immediately ran up to the two men and introduced himself. His name is Dylan, after which he asked if he could get their names. And by the way, they were incredibly strong, he thought. The boy replied, "Brendan, it's nice to meet you." The young man immediately praised him. He, too, is very pleased to meet them all. Then he asked, "What about the girl? What's her name?" To which the girl replied, "It's too much of a rush to ask her name. Isn't he a little brash?" The boy wondered, why doesn't she want to talk to him? But then he thought that maybe she was just shy. Brendan confirmed, "She probably is." The girl gathered herself to act immediately, realizing that the dragon would not stand still. She flew as high as she could, realizing that now was the best moment to slay the monster. Jumping higher, she realized that if she stopped anywhere in the air, this dragon would immediately hit her, and she would fly right back into the wall. That was why the girl decided to act quickly and try to attack this dragon once more, to make it feel that it wasn't the strongest and most powerful monster around. Brandon, without wasting a second, tried to help the girl by applying his own magic. The young man was already trying to overpower this vile beast to make it realize that they would definitely be stronger than himself right now. Dylan didn't want to be left out either, realizing that he had to do something to help his friends. As he ran up close to the beast, the guy realized he had to make some kind of surrounding strike because he couldn't just stand by. Therefore, Dylan immediately used his ability, hitting directly against the ground to create a small earthquake around the dragon. He realized that it probably wouldn't be much use, but he could still at least get the dragon to stop where it was. The young man's punch was truly great, and even the beast himself, looking at the kid, realized that he had some incredibly high power. The dragon instantly moved closer to the boy. Dylan suddenly realized that he had slightly miscalculated the distance of the blow, causing the dragon to be unharmed at all. Even so, the young man wanted to show class, so this time he would end the monster with one powerful blow once and for all. The kid flew up to the creature and tried to punch it as hard as he could. He has accumulated all his power in one stroke, for he has not practiced in vain to get to such a place and present himself as the best player. So Dylan didn't hesitate and hit the dragon with all his might. The young man decided to at least touch the monster to try his luck, and maybe he would succeed. The dragon actually flew pretty far away from the kid from that blow, and apparently everyone else couldn't understand where someone like him got such incredible strength from. Dylan suddenly realized that he had managed to push the monster away after all. He was proud of himself, but wondered if he had hit it too hard. For if he had used a little more force, the dragon would have shattered into small pieces. Kyle had been watching the guys the whole time and realized that they apparently weren't so simple. He landed lower and said they did very well, but that this ordeal was over for them. Kyle noted that he had considered their impressive abilities and looked forward to seeing them in the future, for it seemed he had met the very talents that their god Lyrith was so diligently seeking. That's why he announced to all these guys that from this very moment on, they would be one team. Also importantly, the first stage of the B-Wing, the first test, only the 3 of them passed. They can also make it to the next level without any delays or other obstacles. After all, Kyle was finally convinced that the 3 of them really did count as the best he'd ever met, though of course it hurt about other people, but he was sure he'd still see worthy candidates in that pile. Kyle then asked them all to come closer to him, for right now he wanted them to go through the door in the middle. All the boys were surprised at the sheer size of the door, but Kyle repeated once more that they should go forward. Dylan said that the first trial was much easier than he thought it would be, but the next one should be more fun. He asked the others what they thought the next challenge would be like and if it would be harder than the last one. The girl immediately replied that he was too rowdy of a boy, but Brandon suggested that everyone stick together. Kyle also asked them just one question, to which the kid immediately inquired as to what it was. He asked why on earth they had come to the stair wall. All 3 of them turned around, surprised, not knowing what to answer, as each of them had a different goal in mind. Dylan answered first, saying he came to this place to become much stronger. The girl, on the other hand, confessed that she had come here because she needed to destroy someone powerful with her own hands. Dylan, along with Brandon, were very surprised because they didn't even expect that someone could come to a place like this with the purpose of destroying someone. Kyle immediately inquired about the 3rd contestant, asking what the guy in the middle wanted to accomplish in a place like this. At this moment, the young man was suddenly overwhelmed by memories, and he remembered the time when he and his brother were running away from the terrible monster. The kid realized that apparently the most traumatic event in his life was that very incident. He begged his brother to let him go, saying he had to save his father no matter what. But each time he only ran further and further away from the place, realizing that there was no point and it was very dangerous. Soon they were able to escape after all, and Dylan asked his brother John if he could have saved his father if he had been so much stronger. The young man added that he felt so useless. The brother quoted to the boy the words their father often repeated. He who is able to overcome pain and keep smiling becomes even stronger. The kid asked if his brother wanted to continue to protect the people he cared about. If the answer is yes, the brother suggested the boy become much stronger than he is now. The older brother promised that he too would become stronger and would be waiting for the younger one at the end of their journey, in the same place. He wished the boy to go beyond his own abilities and reach the edge of the world. The brothers agreed to meet when they both became what their father wanted them to be. The eldest emphasized that these were not just words, but a real promise. John turned to Dylan with these words. Since that day, the boy had been smiling constantly, eager to accomplish the goal set by his brother. And now he's standing in front of a stairwell wall, ready to face whoever he has to face. That's how John told the story to Kyle. The girl commented approvingly that they could now move on to the next stage. As the kid ran, he suggested to his friends that the question asked of him was also part of the challenge. Brandon agreed that it was quite likely. The young man reflected on the fact that neither riches, gold, silver, nor treasure can give a man the power to hold the world in his hands. Kyle realized that these 3 guys could make a difference in the world. Smiling, the kid realized that this young man, with God's help, could really get on the right path. The day was approaching when someone would reach the top of the staircase wall. While the boys were discussing this, they were wondering where they would end up in the near future. The friends had traveled a long way to get here, even defeating a dragon. Now they faced the challenge of climbing a huge ladder to the next level. The stairs were truly grand, and only God knows how long it would take the 3 boys to reach the 2nd floor. Brandon pointed out that this must be the transition to the next level, and it looked amazing. Dylan agreed, marveling at the height of the floor. The guy was instantly enthusiastic, realizing how cool and exciting it was. The buddies looked at their comrade carefully, making sure that he was indeed blazing with enthusiasm. The girl suggested running to the 2nd level to start running through it as soon as possible. She decided to ask the guy a question, waiting until he turned around and was ready to listen. The girl wondered if he trusted them too much. After all, there was a chance they would have to fight each other in the next level. So she asked him to stop pretending they were best friends. Unexpectedly, the guy replied that such a thing was indeed possible, though he thought to himself what a nuisance this girl was. As they ran, the boy asked the girl if she was wearing a cape or a jacket. Brandon confirmed that he was curious too, and they discussed whether they should buy one because it looked cool. The girl wondered what they were talking about at a time like this. Finally getting to the end, the guy admitted he wasn't tired at all and they did a great job. The young man lit up with the urge to open the door, anticipating something incredible. He made sure that all the tests would be peculiar. Kyle, who was already on the second floor thanks to his teleporting skills, praised the boys for successfully making it here, where the second stage test would take place. The friends stopped in town, wondering if it was a moulage or just part of the level. The kid announced to the group that the core members had arrived and they could begin the next challenge. He also introduced himself as a level 2 guide, ready to officially continue their ordeal. The boy enthusiastically remarked that this place was amazing, and the guide was a carbon copy of the level 1 guide. Brendan suggested that they must be twins. The young man assured them that the second level trials would be easy enough to pass. He explained that all they would need to do is do a little damage to each other. The wristbands they are given are sensors that start flashing to detect a hit, and the team gets 1 point. The point of the challenge was to see which team would score the most points. As the boys looked closer, they noticed that these bracelets looked incredibly cool. Kyle explained that the challenge is in a battle format between 2 teams of 3. To advance, a team needs to score at least 300 points in 60 minutes, whether they win or lose. If they can get the required number of points in the specified time, they will advance to the next level. The kid added that depending on the situation, both teams may move on or both teams may not. He believes that the conditions are clear, and they can start right away. After that, the 60-minute timer started, and the guy happily remarked that they were lucky to be on the same team. This was going to be fun. Upon landing on the ground, the boys were eager to meet their opponents. The boy was raring to go, eager to see who they were going to fight. Taking a closer look, he realized that the opponents were probably somewhere in that direction. The opposing team was guessing who they would get first, but either way, it should be exciting. The girl started discussing glasses, mentioning that everyone she'd met before had a 0 each. By this point, each of the allies and adversaries had found someone with whom they could compete with using various weapons. The girl curiously told the guy that she wondered how many points he would have at the end of the round. The young man laughed in response to her words and assured her that he would definitely not be bored with her. Meanwhile, another girl and a guy had already entered the battle, wielding something like a spear and a blade respectively. The kid smugly declared that he would win anyway, even fighting with one hand while keeping the other in his pocket. The girl accepted his challenge, and the young man realized that she seemed to want to make up since she was doing such things. But even so, the girl realized that she didn't care about showing off right now. So she began to fight in earnest, albeit with one hand. The girl was completely calm, confident in her ability to defeat this boy. She wasn't so sure about the others. The kid felt that something was wrong, for this girl was surprisingly strong. They were fighting each other now, and although there wasn't enough time to see everything in detail, the fight was quite intense. The girl asked the guy if he was going to stand in one place for much longer. The boy was unwilling to endure such humiliation, realizing that this girl was not fighting the way she should. She was wielding one arm, and he was trying his best not to fall foul of her. The kid declared that he would defeat her anyway since she was taunting him like that. At this moment, Brandon and the other boy began to fight using their level magic. The boy laughed and asked if this short man had nothing at all to boast about in front of him. He also wondered where Brandon had learned to dodge his punches so deftly. The boy set traps wherever Brandon went. He wondered why they called him short, since they were almost the same height. Brandon was outraged, realizing that he was being mocked, and set out to prove that they were indeed the same height. Why would he be called names? The boy smugly stated that Brandon's punches were insignificant against someone like him. He didn't ask to be tickled, so let his opponent not even think he could do anything to him. Even so, the short man turned around and saw that Brandon had decided to attack after all. The boy realized that Brandon must have just made an unfortunate move since he had anticipated the move. The kid told Brandon with a chuckle that he was certainly in dire straits, but that wasn't the case right now. He continued his taunting by stating that not only is Brandon weak in magic, but he's also a clumsy runt. Now that's news. The young man gradually realized that even though they were the same height, it didn't change anything. The opponent was stronger than him anyway. Brandon realized that since he'd been called clumsy, he'd have to do something else. The kid tried to justify himself by saying that he was still a beginner. That's why he was moving so clumsily. While these two were fighting, Dylan and the girl were also doing battle, and quite well at that. The young man dared to attack the girl, making every effort to impress her. But the girl ended up being much stronger than he expected. She easily punched him in the face. The kid tried to attack her again, hoping this time to repel her blow and strike back. The young man realized that it was getting worse with each attempt, so he should have pulled himself together and shown her what she deserved. The boy rushed forward, eager to express to the girl everything he thought of her, realizing that now everything depended only on him. The girl looked at him carefully, noticing that he was very serious. At that moment, they clashed fists, and it was clear that only after such a blow would it be clear which of them would be stronger. Suddenly, the kid wondered, why exactly did they slap each other's hand? Just then, the girl threw another punch, knocking the guy back. He shrieked, recognizing that he was getting nowhere. With each movement, he slid across the floor, realizing that it would be extremely difficult for him to do anything against her now. Taking another look at the girl, the guy noted with admiration that this fight was awesome. The young man laughed and recognized that she was indeed very strong since she was able to fight so skillfully against him. And yet, no matter how hard he looked at it, he realized that they had started off somehow wrong, because her skills were simply incredible. So the boy wondered what her secret was. The girl looked closely at her opponent and thought that most likely the reason for her superiority was due to the difference in their strength. She prepared to throw another punch to explain it to him more lucidly. The guy realized that his rival was really harsh since she wasn't even going to answer his question. The young man noticed as the girl began to rapidly approach him in huge, lightning-fast strides. The girl stepped up close to him and made some points clear after all. She demanded that he finally grow up. He realized that she must be furious since she was so eager to kill him. The young man flew a considerable distance away from her. Even though he knew it was only a training session, he still realized that this was no longer a joke. At this moment, his teammates were watching as this girl nearly knocked the guy out completely. She just watched and realized that he probably really wouldn't demonstrate anything special, as she had assumed at the beginning of the round. Still, there's a lot to discover on the stairwell wall after all, but she'll have to try harder still. The girl also added that she came to this place to see what she was even capable of and thought she was fighting others, but would only be able to realize the limit of her abilities if she faced a truly worthy opponent. She really didn't expect her first opponents to turn out to be worthless weaklings with no abilities, but with that ridiculous smirk on her face, it was one disappointment. What she found most disgusting was that he didn't just have 0 points, but far less, perhaps even so much so that he went into the minus side. At that moment, the girl pounced on him and said that she was sorry, but would have to wait for the next opponents to find out her true strength. The guy was very serious at this moment and realized that now he would be able to have fun, because he was sure that he would be able to show her his true power. The young man immediately apologized and said he was sorry if she didn't like his smile. But don't let her get so angry because that's his philosophy of life. The girl suddenly wondered if the guy had really lost his mind after she hit him, after which she instantly stepped back, realizing that the punch just missed its target. She also inquired of the lad what this curious principle of life was. But despite that, she still suggested that they fight seriously right now. The guy said that for what it's worth, she applied the defense enhancement at an extreme level. The girl was about to use her ghost blades, realizing that perhaps this young man would show his true strength after all. At that moment, the guy realized that she really did want to fight at full strength. This is going to be really interesting. That was why he decided that he himself wouldn't be lagging behind and would also fight to the best of his ability. At that instant, the young man immediately rushed forward and said that this time he would definitely hit her. For now they would be fighting fist against fist, and everything would only depend on strength. The girl at this point began to realize that something serious was about to happen. At the same time, Brenda was fighting against that short guy who kept calling her names. He laughed at him and said he looked so exhausted. Why didn't he just give up and then it would be over? To which the short man replied that no. It was another incentive for him to get stronger, so he wouldn't get tired at all. So in that same instant, he attacked the guy while he was shooting right at him. The young man realized that he would not give up without a fight, and would fight to the end. After that, Brandon, after creating magic discs, immediately launched them directly at the enemy. The guy only laughed at him, realizing that he was a funny brat since he was trying to do his best to defeat him even in such a peculiar way. But for what it's worth, even though he thinks he's smart, the guy still managed to kick those magic circles aside. and so sloppy that he almost hit a girl. At the same moment, the young man she was fighting attacked her. The girl wondered where he saw a blind spot. Isn't he acting like a coward of some sort on his own? The guy only snapped at the swordswoman to shut up and not comment on his movements at all, because sooner or later he would kill her. She wondered thoughtfully if he was really serious about this. The girl has no problem dodging his blows to demonstrate what she is capable of. After that, she immediately kicked him with her foot so that he wouldn't relax so much. She did realize that she might have gone a little overboard, but it would still be a lesson to the guy, that you should not underestimate your opponent just because he is not fighting at full strength. Though despite that, she also realized that he did seem to be completely lost in the realization that people could be stronger than himself. But the young man didn't care, and he only wanted to defeat her, saying that this is what he calls a fight. Let them not fight a swordswoman like her anymore. The girl looked closely at him and thought he must be obsessed with something similar, or even worse. At the same moment, the guy immediately tried to hit her shield once more and said that her defense was really solid, since he really couldn't penetrate it. Just as suddenly, the girl removed her defenses and hit him back. The young man was counting on it, so he had no trouble understanding what he should do next. Dylan tensed, so she didn't immediately realize what he was going to do to her next. But it came as a surprise to him that she jumped up too, and even higher than him. So he didn't anticipate such a moment and realized that things were probably about to go wrong. The guy still decided to seize the moment and kick her while she was in the air, even though he realized his leg was already hurting like hell. But despite the fact that he had hit her, she didn't care about that blow, and she was flying straight down. That was why contact with the ground was hard enough to avoid. The young man, of course, hit the ground, then did a little somersault to get to his feet in time. He managed to land after all, and his expression immediately changed from a smile to a rather stern one. Gradually, the guy began to realize that such battles he only dreamed about in his dreams, and now it's happening for real, and he can't believe that he still hasn't struck a single blow to this girl. The young man realized that she was truly an amazing person. Just as suddenly, he heard his girlfriend tell him that he was completely unable to read his opponent's movements, and that was bad. The girl, still fighting, told him not to be dumb and act according to his opponent's movements, and only then would he be able to defeat her. It's also the only way to withstand their attacks. While she was talking about it, the guy resented that he couldn't believe she was looking around during the battle. Was she really going to die so easily? The young man slowly began to understand her friend, so he wondered why she decided to help him now. After all, she had treated them rather coldly before. The girl only laughed and told him to make no mistake, because she was only helping him because they were now a team. At the same moment, the guy who was fighting her said to damn the swordswoman to focus on the battle. The young man slowly began to understand her and realized that he was indeed making a lot of mistakes based on her words. The guy started to realize and thought he would need to predict his opponent's next move and find a gap in his future actions. The girl began to move closer and closer to him, but he, in turn, tried to move farther away so he could think properly some more. This girl was hitting harder and harder, and the guy couldn't figure out how he could find anything resembling a loophole now. With each blow, the girl gradually moved closer to the young man, but he, in turn, tried to think of something else. And the best option for him turned out to be to simply step back and wait for the moment she lowered her shields. The guy couldn't stop thinking about what he would do in that moment. The girl came very close to him and told him that it was all useless against her, after which, once she got as close to him as possible, she immediately launched him into the air to keep him relaxed. After that, with swift movements, she came in from the other side, realizing that even if he predicted her movement, it still wouldn't work. Therefore, jumping up, she delivered a crushing blow. And on top of that, the girl also realized that he wouldn't be able to keep up with her speed. It would take him a very long time to attack her. The young man realized that now he would have to do his best to avoid a lot of blows. Except the tricky part is that this girl is unimaginably fast. His body was like a punching piñata, because there was nothing he could do right now. And this girl just kept hitting him, thus increasing her points. The guy realized that he needed to focus, and only then would he be able to do anything at all. The young man bounced back, realizing he was going to have a hard time now. Taking a closer look at the girl, he realized that he would need to act very quickly and skillfully if he didn't want to die right there. Looking at this girl, the guy realized that she was extremely fast, and he wouldn't be able to give her a decent fight back. Her attack seemed almost inevitable. That was why he had a plan B. If things continued like this, he wouldn't be able to win, the young man pondered. Right now, he needed to use his best skill to defeat this girl. He stood still as she approached him at an incredible speed. In the end, all he had to do was overpower her. So the guy decided to put everything on the line, realizing that now he would do what he had previously planned. After all, right now he was going to take a hit and it would work perfectly. After that, he would immediately strike back. The boy instantly rushed forward, realizing it was now or never. Things were not going well, to be honest, so he had no choice but to use the reinforcement on his arm, and also apply a hovering fist with which he can return and immediately strike at this girl. But just as the kid was about to do so, the main host Kyle announced that the quest was over and asked them to stop fighting. Machechka began to rejoice, saying that it was finally over, just in time as he had previously anticipated. In that same instant, the guy realized what the hell it was that hurt. Kyle said that since both teams earned 300 points each, they both made it through this round regardless of the outcome. The girl stood motionless, realizing that she was about to find out how many times she was able to hit the opponent she was fighting. She also watched as her opponent unsuccessfully tried to punch her. It was over pretty quickly. While they were fighting, the boy even lost track of time. The young man laughed and said he was actually in pain. The girl stared at him, not understanding what was happening to him. She'd beaten him, and he was still acting like his usual self. As she looked closer at the blow he was about to deliver, though, she realized it was truly terrifying. And if the kid hit her, she'd be in trouble. She really didn't expect the boy to be so strong. Even the distant wall was seriously damaged by the airflow. The boy immediately informed the conductor that such a thing was unacceptable. He also wondered if they really had gotten to 300 points that fast. A little more and he would have been able to hit her. The girl only smiled and thought that if he did, she'd probably hoof it off somewhere nearby. Kyle congratulated the teams on passing and said they now had to go out the front door and up the stairs to get to the next level. The boy told the swordswoman that the next time they met, she would lose to him anyway. He also asked her to remember his name, Gara. He would be reminded of it each time and would be the one who would surely defeat her. The girl thought about it and noticed that he had a rather odd name. The short man immediately went up to the guy and told him he had a good time. His name is Esseron, so don't let him take offense at the way they fought. He also added that he is really short and his name is Brandon. He hopes that they will meet again someday. The boy only laughed at that and said, okay, he'd say goodbye this time. The young man laughed at the situation and said he couldn't believe he never got to hit her once. So he immediately said that she was incredibly awesome at fighting and dodging. He also promised that he would definitely beat her next time. The kid made the promise to the girl and then their team told him he was digging in there and didn't go on. Dylan immediately told the girl that okay, they would see each other again a little later. Suddenly she turned to Dylan and he asked if she really wanted to say something to him. The girl told the guy that her name was actually Marina and asked him what his name was in return. The boy only laughed and answered that his name was Dylan. It was funny that she showed such respect to him. But the girl added that okay, Dylan, she wanted to ask him a certain question, and that question was why he had come to a place like this. The young man wondered if everyone in a row would ask why they were coming to a place like this. The guy decided to say he would have to meet someone after all. The girl suddenly thought about it and noticed that that last punch had been a really good one. She was really surprised that he could do that. So she wished that he would become even stronger, and maybe they would meet again. She also extended her hand to him and told him that she would forgive him for being rude in the beginning, and let him have fun going towards the same goal she had. Most importantly, the girl added, let them meet at the very end one more time. The kid, laughing, shook her hand after all and said that yes, he thought they should get closer sometime. He also turned to her and told her that he would become much stronger. Just let her be ready. The girl, in turn, looked at him closely and began to understand why this kid was so cheerful. In fact, he was very happy to be in a place like this. Kartoshka told Marina to get on their way or they'd be late, to which she replied that yes, let's go after all. It was after this incident that the girl realized that she would remember him well. After all, Dylan is really a very funny guy, and she hopes that soon they will meet. The kid told all the guys lets them go to the next stage, to which his friend replied that they could go right now, and wow, the girl is with them. Kyle thanked them for their understanding and asked them to return the bracelets. The guys replied that they could keep climbing, right? Kyle said yes, let them go higher. The kid was the first to dare open that door and realized that apparently the further it went, the worse it got. The stairs they took to the next floor didn't look the same, but still, the young man realized that okay, let them keep going upstairs like a real team after all. The girl suddenly asked what made him think they were a team. They just teamed up just because of the test. The kid also turned to her and told her that she actually helped him a lot last time. To which she replied that she only did it because he got his ass kicked. The boy only laughed and said, "Okay, stop denying it." She had helped him no matter what happened. She suddenly wondered why he was always so cheerful. The unknown voice said that they had done a good job of getting through the second floor. Dylan immediately asked the boys where the voice was coming from. The voice said his name was Kay, and he was a third-floor guide. The boy asked if the man was supposed to be somewhere nearby. Kay tells them that the third quest starts at the end of the stairs, and the first hurdle is to get to the test site. And speaking of which, he wishes to see them all safe and sound. Soon the young man realized that apparently the exit was closer than last time, and it must be the entrance to the third floor, the kid thought. He said the next place will be even better than the previous ones. After all, they had just found themselves in some sort of nature emulator. The further they went, the more amazing the places became. How did they even manage to create a forest in a place like this? The boy wondered. He also noticed that there are even clouds in such a place. How is that possible? Brandon replied that the space inside the stairs has a different environment than the outside, and he has heard that there are even some areas where it snows. Dylan said that he really knew a lot about such places. He even got a little embarrassed and answered that he just read a lot of books, so he knows. And besides, he, like Dylan, doesn't know much. The boy immediately asked the blonde what she was even doing. And she told him to mind his own business. She had no reason to stay where she was. The young man told her that hell, they might as well all climb further together. But instead, she told him to stop following her. Suddenly, all together, they noticed something unusual. He asked what it even was. Brandon told the guy that it looked like a big door somewhere in the distance. The girl didn't know what they were talking about, as she thought they were going to split up after all. Soon they noticed something unusually large nearby. Dylan asked what it even was, to which Brandon replied that it was a creature that was heading toward them, must be living on the third stage. The boy, laughing, said that they needed to defeat this monster to get past the third floor. He realized that it would be great, because he was sure it would be very interesting to fight such creatures. Suddenly, however, they did focus as the monster began to approach them rather quickly. But suddenly, they weren't expecting what they saw. That monster was just gone in an instant. He was killed by someone unknown. Taking a closer look, Dylan couldn't understand what had just happened. At one point, the kid finally said what he had been waiting to say for so long. There was no way the girl could see the stranger standing in front of her. The young man, without wasting a moment, confessed that he had always believed in this meeting on the landing, and now he was immensely glad that his expectation had not been in vain. Dylan was surprised to see a stranger around them, and wondered if he was on his way to the test site. The girl did not hesitate to ask if his name was Cayman, to which the boy immediately inquired if she really knew him and was his friend. Cayman explained to her that he wanted to ask her to go quietly with him, but realized it would be a waste of words and decided to check with her to see if his reasoning was correct. The girl, upon reflection, still answered the question with a question to a question. Since when did he become so rude? But the guy took one look at her and realized that a peaceful solution didn't seem to be in sight. Without thinking long, the kid lunged right at them, apologizing and saying he'd have to grab her by force. Dylan wondered, was this guy attacking them? At the same instant, hands began to appear from the ground, eager to grab our travelers. The girl, noticing this, realized that she was in for a real treat, because by the looks of it, he was after her. Soon Cayman was right behind the girl's back. Instantly, he handcuffed her so she couldn't use her power. What was also unexpected was that there were many minions near this guy, one of whom was using a sand trap. The girl was really quite frightened, for she did not even expect them to be so well prepared for such actions. One of the servants said that if she agreed to go quietly with them, they would personally escort her without any danger. She was indignant. Damn it. Damn cowards don't want to fight fair and resort to tricks. The young man was about to explain himself and said, okay, let them finally move on. Dylan asked these people where they were even going. He was also outraged and wondered what they were doing to their comrade. Suddenly, he noticed an unusual emblem on one of these servants. While the boy urged everyone to stop immediately, Brandon held Dylan back to tell him something important. The boy turned around and asked what was the matter, for they must catch up with these people and save their friend. The kid reported that these guys are Terry's knights. The young man inquired as to what kind of knights they were in general. Brandon explained that Terry is a kingdom that will go to any lengths to accomplish their goals, and they are the knights of that kingdom. That's why he suggests taking your time to run after them, because there's no telling what will happen to them if they get caught up in all of this. Dylan thought the boy was going to say something important, but he only offered to continue on his way, to which Brandon objected that they still had a test to pass. The kid suddenly wanted to share his thoughts with his friend, even though he wasn't sure how he felt about it. Being a boy who tends to protect everyone and give smiles, he wasn't going to pretend like he didn't see what had just happened in front of him. Most importantly, he thinks the blonde isn't a bad girl and is willing to save her by all means. The boy looked closely at Dylan and realized he might have said too much, but still decided to help and go along with him. In that case, they would not stand still, but would catch up with the fugitives before they got too far away. These same ninja knights tried to get as far away from that place as possible, hoping that the young lady's journey was comfortable. After all, they must return to the castle where the king awaits her arrival. Being the greatest daughter and princess of tennis, it is her duty to be in the kingdom. Since childhood, the girl has been told that she must be a strong heir to her country, so it is her duty to do her best to get better and better every day. The little girl only wondered why she was born a princess and why she was given such a responsibility. They got far enough away from that location and realized that this location would likely be suitable for further action. They gathered in a small circle, talking about how they needed to hurry now. Cayman, as the head, needs to make sure the princess gets home as soon as possible, and they also need to leave the place before the guardian arrives. Suddenly, someone from the forest asked, "Where are those rascals hiding?" Cayman immediately asked the princess if it was really them and her companions. The girl instantly realized that this fool had already had enough of her. The young man shouted loudly, "Hey, can it finally show itself already?" The kid was slightly surprised to realize that he was actually quite close. The boy began to look closely at everyone present and realized where they were actually hiding. The young man uttered, "Of course he wasn't sure who he was, but if the truth was going to really interfere with them, he wouldn't just stand by." Delane replied mockingly, "What an arrogant samurai they've gotten." That guy motioned at him and declared, "That they can still run away, so let's have them do it now." The young man asked, "Are they really so stupid that they think he'll just take off and run away?" He also added, "Since that's the case, he'll fight the captain first and see how it goes." The girl realized that this kid was really an idiot since he dared to attack respectable knights like them. Cayman turned to the boy. He recognizes his bravery, but let him not forget that he is the one who is alone now. The guy also noted, coming to a place like this without support is actually pretty stupid. But the man only smiled and asked, "Did you really think he had come alone?" Cayman immediately suspected something wrong, because come to think of it, there were originally two of them. The girl uttered, "Did he seriously think he had come there all alone? It was all planned out and Brandon just shot it so his partner could push off." The guy didn't expect this kid to turn out to be not as stupid as he seemed at first glance. The young man immediately asked, "Help him again, please." Someone responded instantly, "It will help now." In the same instant, the chains fell from the girl's hands, and she realized she could use her weapon again. The young man was deadly serious and realized that this was their last chance to escape. Soon the guy managed to grab a katana from one of his opponents and realized that now they could show who was in charge. The boy grinningly asked his buddy, "How did he like the performance?" Alish looked at him and replied, "Okay," he admits, "that was a good trick." The blonde was still displeased and stated, "They are still idiots, for it is useless." The young man told her, "They had come all this way together. Maybe they could still find common ground at least for a little while before this?" She said thoughtfully, "Traveling together doesn't make sense anymore, so don't even count on it." The kid apologized to her and confessed, "He's already attached to him, so he's not going to let her get hurt, no matter how much she disowns him." The girl replied, "He'd better take care of himself first, and then the others." But the boy pointed to the katana and added, "Of course, he's not sure, but this thing he's holding in his hand seems to belong to her." He also honestly admitted, he doesn't fully understand what happens in a situation like this, but I wish him luck. The girl adjusted herself, took the katana in her hands and said, "Okay, she's really going, but he'll accept her offering." Cayman turned to his squad. He would only need 2 as well, the rest could move on. He also added, "Plus, he'll be able to deal with this girl one-on-one. And the rest of us, in turn, can finish off those 2 kids who think they are heroes," the commander ordered. Soon a small skirmish broke out between them, and each began to prepare for their next moves. The guy realized, these guys think they can beat them. It's pretty stupid of them to think that. The girl realized, okay, let these 2 try to fight, but right now, the main thing is to confront the leader. That guy said, "Sorry to disrespect him, but they are forcing him to do this." He apologized again to Princess Tennis. Hopefully, he wouldn't blame him too much at the palace for that. The girl pulled out her katana and declared to Cayman, he would not back down, even though he was her father's commander. She uttered, That's enough of that. It ends right here and now. The boy looked closer and realized that the princess seemed to be serious. The young man was extremely surprised, for he had never seen the princess use such monstrous power against her own allies. The girl applied the defense enhancement in extreme mode as well as the Blade of Agony. The commander-in-chief realized his fatal mistake of fighting the princess seriously. It must be realized that he has no choice. Therefore, no matter what, he had to get her to the palace at all costs. Dylan, fighting, was very much surprised by this girl's abilities, for he had not seen anything like this before. Of course, along with him, Brandon was also quite amazed. The commander-in-chief realized, damn it, she was even stronger than she was before. What should he do with such strength now? The girl, grinning, said, he is already imagining what will happen if he fails the task. The king would definitely be upset. Guy turned to Princess Tennis, saying that she was always stronger than everyone else. He also added, but all the while he has been training hard to achieve even a fraction of Princess Tennis's strength. The girl took a closer look at him and began to look at him with disdain, realizing that he was unlikely to succeed. She would be interested to watch him try, though. The young man immediately strengthened the defense on his sword composed of sand. He began to attack, realizing that if she didn't hold back, he would fight at full strength as well. The girl slowly began to understand why the king had chosen this particular guy as commander. She continued to defend herself, realizing that the best option now would be to destroy the enemy standing in her way. So the princess decided to seize the moment and do everything she could to defeat this guy. The two tried to move as carefully as possible around each other, not wanting to cause serious bodily harm. While it might seem from the outside that there was nothing safe here, they still tried to proceed carefully. At one point, the girl just let go of the katana, which the man didn't expect at all. She then immediately grabbed the sword with her other hand and tried to strike. The guy, not expecting this, jumped up high to avoid the attack. The girl didn't hesitate and continued throwing punches. She decided to go up higher with him and fight there to find out which of the two of them had gotten stronger. The boy realized that all his efforts would probably be useless against the princess. But no matter what, he had to do something to overpower her. Even after he defended himself, the girl continued to ruthlessly attack him. The young man felt that it was getting harder to fight with each movement. He also realized that apparently all his training was in vain, for the princess moved amazingly and he might not stand much of a chance. The princess asked him, "Is he done warming up?" "She's been ready for a while." The young man tried his best and asked, "Also, don't let him look at him with that serious look, please." The girl realized that even these pebbles would definitely not save him. Soon, these same pebbles turned from ordinary stones into fiery fireballs. Oh shit, that's not going to stop the girl anyway, the guy thought. Each time she came closer and closer, she decided to try her luck to overpower him with a single blow. They switched to each other, realizing that this was where it would end now. Just as suddenly, a kid intervened in their little fight and said they shouldn't continue. He approached and stated that he needed them for something else. The girl was very surprised that this man had stopped their blows with a cotton wand. She just couldn't understand how he managed to stop her blade with a cotton wand. The guy said, "So he was able to stop her after all. That's the end of it. Well, then it's only for the best." He also wondered, is this kid really a bodyguard? He didn't look much like a candidate. Suddenly his acolytes turned to him. They reported that the portal leading to the kingdom had been opened. The young man uttered, "It can't be helped. He'll be back to get her next time. So let Princess Tennis, don't relax too much," the boy warned. The boy shouted, "They must retreat! Everyone into the portal quickly!" Brandon was very surprised that they suddenly ran away. Dylan was also shocked that they all suddenly decided to just leave the battlefield. They wondered, did these guys really come through the portal to this very place? The guardian was asked what had just happened, to which he replied, "Oh, nothing much happened." The girl wondered why the guardian was so late. "They're just having a little sparring session between the newbies. He'll be right back." The guardian sighed and said, "Be that as it may, it will be very difficult to raise them. Children are nothing but trouble these days." The boy wondered who they were, and immediately realized that he must be the very guardian. Besides, he is present on every floor. Dylan immediately realized what he was doing and decided to praise him. It must be cool to be the guardian of all the floors. He laughed and replied, "Yeah, he'd talk some more, but he's got other things to do." The guardian also noted, by the way, he had heard that there wasn't much time left until the end of the test, so they had best hurry up. After that, he wished them good luck. The boy was immediately surprised. "Wow, can they all fly? How cool is that? Will someone teach me how to fly someday?" Brandon reminded his friend. "They really should get going. because the door is really going to close soon. The boy asked, "What happens when it closes?" Brandon explained, "When the door closes, they won't be able to get to the next level. So it's worth hurrying there as soon as possible." The boy was greatly surprised and asked in what sense they would have to hurry. After all, they couldn't just stay where they were and admire the views of these forests. After some thought, he realized there was nothing he could do and told the redhead that they would go ahead after all. The boy turned to the girl, asking why she was staring at him. He told her to go, or they would all be late for the test. The girl suddenly wondered and asked why they had decided to help her, since they had found out she was a princess. The blonde immediately asked the boy why he didn't ask for details, as it would have been quite important information for him. Turning around, the kid was surprised and questioned what she was even talking about. She asked him why he was acting like nothing had happened, since she had seen everything that had happened just a short time ago. The girl emphasized that it was no small thing to note all this mess around Gaima and his subordinates' attempts to kidnap her. Besides, should they wonder what was going on around them at all and why everyone had decided to hunt her specifically? The boy replied that that was it, but also added that he didn't want to ask her for some reason. And besides, why should he be interested? She got a little angry and asked him what he meant. If he was helping her out of pity, he would regret it. He answered her that he was not in this place because he was interested in her past. So he had no reason to ask her about such things. The girl was in a complete stupor and couldn't understand why they weren't asking for any information about it at all. The young man smiled and told her that she must have been through a lot, but still didn't understand anything. He explained that he is here because she seems like a good person to him. That is why he wants to protect her and do his best to get along with her. The girl looked at him closely, not realizing if this kid was weird or if he was really that honest. After those sincere words from the boy, she suddenly had a memory of the princess doing something similar someday. The memories were horrible, and said that one day she would meet people who would look at her not as a princess but as a person, and they would appear very soon. In that catastrophe, all he was saying was that she would only move forward with them. She would have to do it for one thing, their majestic kingdom, and also for her own sake, for as a person she must show and demonstrate selflessness to those who are worthy and will want to protect her. The boy told all the boys that now they should move out even faster to make it in time. Suddenly, a girl announced that her name was Tennis. The young man apologized to her and asked her again what she was saying since he couldn't hear. The girl reminded him that he had asked her name, hadn't he? She said her name was Tennis Jean Arden, which was her name. The boy was greatly surprised and thought that since she told her name, it was a good sign. But while she was sad and reminiscing, the kid said they really had to go or they'd be late. Soon he called out to Tennis to come with them or they wouldn't make it in time. The girl was glad that she was finally starting to move forward and that she was no longer a princess, but just a real Tennis. These guys quickly started moving forward and didn't even notice that they had already run quite a distance. Suddenly, Brandon decided to say something to Tennis that she took notice of. The boy confessed to her that in fact, the last time he'd come to rescue her, he'd been asked by Dylan to follow him. He also admitted that he had hesitated for a while as he wanted to attack them all with Dylan. As he spoke, the boy looked at him and thought that Brandon had really made up his mind to be honest. Brandon added that if someone was in trouble, he would have to help them, but admitted he didn't mean what he did, so he apologized to his friends. The girl understood that he was really having a hard time, so she accepted the situation. She told him that they had both acted very foolishly in coming to save a man they hardly knew, but still thanked them for the act. As for Dylan, he's all right, the girl said. He's just too easygoing and pushy, and he replied that people always tell him that. Still, she realized that he had come to her rescue anyway, and she was grateful for that. Truth be told, Brandon was even a little surprised that the girl smiled for the first time. The kid also realized, after all, that he hadn't risked it for nothing to save someone's human life. The young man immediately told everyone else that he could only present them with one situation: monsters. But still, he couldn't understand why there were so many of them in their way. "Is this even normal?" the boy began to say. Just then he realized that there wasn't much time left before the door closed, so they should have hurried. The boys rushed forward as fast as they could, realizing that now they needed to get through these monsters as quickly as possible. The kid had the presence of mind to say, "Wow, they managed to get through them all after all." And also they were almost there and were able to get to those very doors, so basically they made it in time. Dylan shouted for everyone else to go ahead and find out what the next assignment would be. Upon entering the place, they were all very much surprised at what they had just seen. The boy was also amazed at what he saw, the likes of which he wouldn't have seen anywhere before. They realized this was the location of the third challenge, and it looked really cool. As they walked and looked around, Dylan also added, "Wow, there are so many people in a place like this in general." Suddenly, the doors behind them began to close slowly. And if the boys had stayed a little longer for the previous test, they wouldn't have made it. Suddenly, another person came out of that ordeal and shouted, "Hey, wait for him, please!" The young man ran as hard as he could and said he was almost there. In his last moments, he tried to run as fast as he could, but no one would stop because the doors there were mechanical, timed, and as a result, the door closed and that guy didn't make it to the level in time. Brandon only chuckled a little with a slightly dim laugh, talking about how lucky they were that they weren't late. He also added that he was glad he had been able to warn them about it. In other words, if he didn't make it in time, they'd be stuck there for a long time. The boys suddenly wondered if this was it. Well then, we'll have to look around to see what will happen at the next test. He immediately decided to meet someone and ask if they too had gotten to this place on time. One of the trio they were fighting against turned her attention to them and said, "Oh, it's Dylan." The girl said she was happy to see him again too, to which Dylan replied that they did it too, and that's cool. Suddenly, an unknown voice presumably contrived to say to everyone else, "So they hope everyone is all in." Coming closer to the steps, he continued, "Let them finally begin the ceremony." Mitsuri greeted all the citizens who approached her. She looked a lot like her twin brother Kyle, but that didn't matter. She said, "Thank you all for their labors." He is Mitsuri, a third stage guide. Dylan was very surprised because he didn't expect to see another double. He realized that it was worth mentioning that her hair was longer than the other two, so she stood out a lot. The guide said, "Now let them begin the third and final phase of the trials." She also added that they should know. Those who pass the third stage will be sent to the free section, and afterward will become full members of the step wall. Well, of course, she warned that those who could pass the tests would be called rock climbers. Dylan is very excited about the idea. Becoming a rock climber might give him the first step to getting to his brother. The girl also told all the viewers that the criteria for passing the third stage is very simple. For all they will need is the most basic thing they must possess as climbers, the greatest foundation for a future course of action. Well, of course, she was going to show them the essence of their souls, so they would start right now with that. Also importantly, their goal in the third challenge will be to stay on your feet so you don't faint. That's all. Dylan wondered if he'd missed something, since it would probably be easy enough. Mitsuri also added that more accurately, they would be trying to do it, as it would be incredibly difficult for everyone. After which the kid was immediately surprised that apparently it wasn't going to be as easy as it seemed at first glance. Luna was also quite surprised and realized that this was indeed going to be a serious test. Soon many could not stand on their feet and simply fell to their knees. They were in incredible pain from the weight that had fallen on them. The guide immediately told them all that if they couldn't pass this soul check, there was no point in going up any further. She looked in amazement at those who could still stand on their feet. 3 guys stood to their feet and said what a shame that everyone else couldn't resist. Also, the pirate boy said that how in the world could something like that break them? To which the boy replied, "Wow, Kurogiri, he's already sweating and you're talking about such things." He mumbled something back, saying, "Shut up, it's just a little hot in here, so he's sweating." Mitsuri was able to notice that the 3 were indeed admirably standing their ground and just watching everyone else. Dylan also asked what he thought their ordeal would be like yet, and it turned out to be quite simple. After all, this round apparently isn't as difficult as all the others. They'll just have to hold their ground. She looked at them and realized that there were outstanding people among the crowd who could pass the test. The girl realized that it was quite amusing to watch such people. For as much as she thought she was going to scare everyone, some were even more relaxed than they looked, and she liked that. The guide's analysis showed that many of the guys can stand on their feet with no problem. Dylan said, "Okay, fine. Let them go ahead and let Brandon follow me." Suddenly, he heard something was wrong. Why hadn't he heard Brandon? Turning around to take a closer look at what was going on, he noticed something amiss. Brandon couldn't stand against such a flood of energy after all, and the boy just couldn't understand why. The kid looked down and couldn't understand what was happening to him, but he realized he was having a very hard time. No matter how hard he tried, he couldn't figure out what exactly caused him to hit the ground. Dylan just stared at him and couldn't believe that Brandon could be so weak. He realized it was probably something else, though. The boy asked him what had happened to him, but he didn't listen to him and went deep into his thoughts. The guy could see his old uniform, which apparently intimidated him a lot. Even as a child, he had been frightened by many things. But it all started from that time when he lived practically alone, or rather, when he was still at home. Suddenly, he woke up and it was unclear whether he was having some kind of nightmare or just wanted to go to the bathroom. But he clearly had some kind of bad feeling. Looking more closely at the door, he could see light coming from another room in the middle of the night. The kid went to his brother and told him to wake up because something wrong was going on. Brandon's younger brother tells his older brother that their father is in the house and they should hide because he doesn't know what he will do to them next. Just then, the kid wondered if the father was home, and what then? Brandon realized that he was sure his father was drunk and would beat them if they didn't hide. As soon as little brother got out of bed, he suddenly jumped on the blanket. And after that, he just fell to the floor. There was quite a lot of noise from this act, which apparently caused the noise to spread to the other room. The boy said, "Oh man, get up faster." But things turned out to be sad enough. My father showed up just outside the door, which was ajar. Brandon told his brother to get up quickly or it would be too late. Just then he could see that their father was approaching them after all, and it was just awful. The boy covered the door for a while to get a closer look, because if he opened it now, his father would beat him too. The father thought of asking the guy where his brother was, to which he suddenly hesitated and realized he should ask, "What about his brother?" The boy said =, that he didn't to fully know where he was. The guy suggested that maybe he went to the bathroom. Anyway, the kid said he didn't see his brother when he woke up. My dad understood when he said that jerk was out there without his permission. And also the most important question is, why isn't he sleeping? To which the son can answer that he's not feeling well. When the father heard that his son was not feeling well, he realized that he was going to kick him in the stomach, even though he wasn't feeling well himself. His younger brother looked at everything that was going on and couldn't understand what was going on and why this was happening to his family. The father, being drunk, beat his sons nonstop, calling them useless assholes. He accused them of wasting all his money and failing to do even one of his errands. The younger brother begged the older brother to help him. While the younger brother pleaded for help, the older brother only roared, realizing that if he got out, he would simply die. With every second he spent in the closet that day, he lost himself for such an act. Each time he blamed himself for the incident and constantly apologized to his brother. His second personality was telling him that he was still the same as before, and that there was basically no difference between then and now. Getting closer to him, the second personality asked what happened to that person who came to the stairs to become stronger. Where was he now? The second person only laughed and said that there was no difference between them then and now. He was a coward and would remain a coward. It was because he hadn't helped that Hana was dead and lying in her coffin. If he had helped then, maybe things would have been different. The second personality kept saying that he was the same as before. The young man was incredibly nervous and didn't understand what he should do if this was true. He wondered why all this was happening to him, and all because he was weak. The girl paid attention to the way Brandon was acting now. She decided to say something to Dylan that got his attention. The girl looked at the situation and said, "That's how it is." She thought Brandon had always been a good guy. The kid wondered if there was anything to go down for. He'd do it himself. But he didn't believe Brandon could have done anything wrong. The young man had the presence of mind to ask if she really thought it had to be like this. He was referring to whether there was anything he could do to help Brandon at all. The girl only laughed and said that she didn't know to the end what exactly could be done in this situation. But let her try. The kid turned around and wondered how he should help Brandon. The boy turned to Mitsuri, saying that he wished she would pay attention to him. He told her he was downstairs and asked her to come to him. Dylan asked the conductor if he would fail the test if he helped his friend. The guide remained silent, not knowing what answer to give to this question. After all, no one had ever suggested such a thing before. The opponents they fought against were very surprised that Dylan had dared to do such a thing. One participant laughed and said that a place like this is full of weirdos, apparently. Dylan continued to pull his hand up and wait for a response from the guide. The girl in turn said that she was not saying that they could not help other participants get out of a similar condition. Plus, no one is stopping him from helping his team with stuff like this. Brandon was still in that state, and his other half, in charge of the past, asked what he was doing now. Is he just going to keep lying there with that in his head? The boy continued to call Brandon's name, and suddenly he could hear Dylan. Dylan looked at him and told him that if something was bothering him, if it was really something unpleasant, let him tell him. He would help morally with it. And since Brandon is not alone, they have to move on. After all, they still have a long way to go, so they shouldn't dwell on the past, Dylan said. Soon, Brandon stood up, briefly taller, and wondered if he had really just sprawled out and laid on the ground. As soon as he woke up, and in the same instant he fell to the floor again, not realizing what was happening to him, he thought of telling Dylan to. that he can't do anything else and will apparently stay at the bottom. Dylan told him that he could handle it either way since he believed in him. He kept telling him that he would make it, and they would all go to the next challenge together. The kid was incredibly angry at himself, not understanding why he was such a weakling. The girl watched it all, and she had the feeling that every time someone tried to get to their feet, they got a little stronger. Mitsuri was watching the situation, and she was very curious about what would happen next with the three participants. Soon they were able to take each other's hand. Afterward, Dylan said they needed to get to the next challenge as quickly as possible. Brandon realized he could handle future challenges and said he would try his best. Soon they were all able to move on together, and thus Dylan had another, brand new dream. Dylan told Brandon to follow him, and they would soon reach the end of the challenge. Just as the kid realized he should walk a little further, he suddenly heard how bad he felt. This very second, he said he had a lot of fun when Brandon was around him. Afterward, he started laughing loudly at him, saying that Brandon would still come back to him someday. The boy turned back and wondered if his other personality really thought this was going to happen. Dylan asked Brandon what was wrong, why he had stopped where he was. But the man hesitated for a moment, whereupon Brandon said it was okay, he'd be right over. A little time had passed in this place, and now all those people who had been tested were still unable to get to the floor above. They were all firmly regretting what they had done in their lives. It was imprinted in their hearts. They said they almost died while they were in that nightmare. The guide said she would ask those downstairs to go to the exit, whereupon she turned around and said, "Now what about them?" She asked if everyone is all packed up at this location. Apparently, yes. The guide said that in that case, she would continue onward, but one of the boys thought to turn to her. That unknown guy asked her what she was even doing. The man asked what that was all about just now. What kind of test was it that they were all sweating like some cattle? The guy yelled that she was a pathetic guide who wanted to use their power for her own purposes, and also said that's why they're trained to do all this. Let him pass. He's sure good enough at it. He tells her to believe in him. In a fight, he's sure she's weaker than him anyway. He then walked right up to her and said he was going to make her let him pass anyway. The guide told all the people who passed to wait 1 second. She said these cases happen a lot on her shift, so have her do it now. The guide instantly moved from one place to the next, and it wasn't just teleportation. It was actual fast walking. She decided to run as fast as she could and also said she realized he might have some complaints. Oh, and also, it's true that they need individual help, like he said, but still, there are some criteria that she can't just take it and go rogue. The guide went right up to this guy, and the guy has to realize that the power they have. For this understanding, the ordinary unprepared person will not be able to pass the test. The guide immediately showed this peculiar man what power really was. So she approached him closely, providing him with his own hand, which was imbued with magical properties, as a weapon. The guide told him that they didn't want weaklings like him, so he would have to leave the premises anyway. The young man was very much frightened and realized that apparently, for nothing just took and expressed his complaints. Dylan, upon reflection, said it was something incredible that had just happened. Brandon thought he couldn't keep up with her movements, to which Dylan replied that she was a tour guide for a reason. The kid also found himself wondering something else. Since they have access to all the stories of the staircase, but the thing was, he had never heard the story about the guide. At first he thought it was normal, but then it still seemed strange. Brandon told the guide that he was suddenly curious about who the tour guides even were. The blonde suddenly wondered what the word guide could even mean in the understanding of this place. She suddenly realized that guides were a rather interesting concept, something like humans. The young man wondered what, it turns out there were still so many things they didn't know about the stairs. She looked closer and saw the very person who said it was all right. The girl decided to return to the subject. She said let them finally go ahead with the trial and also apologize to them, saying that the incident was very strange, so she hoped they would forgive her. The girl said that since they were all sorted out, they'd have to start from the beginning. The guide greeted them all again, specifically people from the A wing, then the people from B wing, and of course, what would you do without the C wing people? So, the most important thing, she said, is to thank them all for getting to a place like this. I mean, it's incredible how they all managed to come together in groups of 3. And besides, now she could talk about what lay ahead of them all. She decides to tell them briefly, but still. The young man immediately realized that a new adventure was about to begin, so he should listen to the guide more carefully. The girl said about what is at the end of the stairs. Still no one knows. There are hundreds of staircases that have already been explored, but still, how these adventures end, they don't know. And everything that is explored on the stairs comes courtesy of the border climbers. And just as importantly, she will now be able to tell all of them about how they won't be able to reach the border. There are only 3 options for this, and they will start with the first one as they will need to follow their instructions. Guides like her can give them assignments, and they can get to the border step by step in a similar order. And also, of course, pass all the tests for each step. It will be difficult, but she assures them all that if they pass all the tests, they will move up to the next steps. Then comes the second option of not following their instructions. Personally, she doesn't recommend doing that. After all, as well as walking along paths where there are no instructions, they will have a wide choice of paths. And of course, these paths can be both safe and very dangerous. The creatures on these paths, there's no telling what dangers there might be, and it could be very risky for everyone else. And of course, that means they'll all be risking their lives. And it's all up to them, so the choice is theirs. And of course, the very last option is the third option. If they have decided which path they will take, they can create or join a guild. This is the option that offers them complete freedom of choice. If they don't want to, no one will force them to join the guild. The guide also added that this is the end of the explanations, so everyone is free to proceed as they wish. And of course, there's a lot of speculation about what awaits them at the end of the stairs. But it's all just speculation. Let them remember all this well. Well, also, of course, there are those who doubt the latter and those who are deeply consumed with fantasizing about it. That's why they'll be sure later that this is the end of this staircase, and they'll be able to see it all together. Well, in the end, the guys were able to point out that, after all, the guide was probably damn right that a guild would be a good thing. Still, they really don't know what the next challenge will be. It was at this point that the guide also said, please let them take the stairs to the next step and also wish them good luck. They all began to slowly climb up, and one of the men only laughed, saying it would be fun. The group that fought our protagonist and his friends was also fairly quiet. Brandon told the guy that they could actually go, and warned him that he'd be right over. Whereupon the young man decided to run up to them after all, at which the guide watched them and was very much interested. She suddenly wondered what might be next for that boy. The boy thought to appeal to the mysterious guide that they would see each other again someday. The one in turn only smiled and realized that there would probably be something extremely interesting later. She also said she was the one who sent those guys upstairs and also the second floor guide. And she has a question, but she doesn't know for sure if she's referring to herself or not. She doesn't know that for sure. The second floor guide said that those kids he mentioned got through everything with no problems, right? To which the third floor guide replied that yes, they all made it through, and he had already figured out where they were coming from. To which the one replied that although she didn't know all the details either, she said that there is nothing urgent for now. Let him continue with it. But something the one thought to say that yes, he understood. And also learned something still add the third floor guide, saying that this also actually applies. The one thought to say that yes, the first stage also confirmed it. The third floor guide said that if he noticed anything unusual, he should report it immediately. Whereupon the latter only laughed and said that the climbers might enjoy the moment for the time being, and she also realized that it was the will of the god Kainov that they would meet again soon. The young man started to climb higher with the guys, and Dylan realized that he should say, wow, I wonder why in his whole life he had walked on the stairs less than he did now. To which Brendan also added that something was making him a little wobbly. Just then the girl said, finally he sees something there, wow! The kid said, okay, it'd be funny if they found another stairwell they hadn't heard a word about. And he added that, even so, he didn't want to think about it at all. Soon they did reach that place, and the kid was able to spot an elevator. Stepping into it, he immediately realized that that elevator was too huge for a normal elevator. Wasn't it? He thought. Yes, and also strange. But he was probably wrong, because it was probably just an automatic door. They all decided to go inside to get a closer look at this room. The doors behind our heroes immediately closed behind them, which apparently were only open until that point, until someone walked in. All 3 of them were very surprised, and Dylan said that it looked scary, actually. But he also added that maybe they were testing their courage. The kid said, it's not like we're going to be attacked by a bunch of monsters when the doors open, right? Even though that's a problem for us, actually. And to add that, and yet, shouldn't they be ready to fight just in case? The young man didn't give any sign and just stood still, wondering what could possibly happen at all. Though, according to him, whatever it was, he could still get by along with his comrades. As suddenly, he was able to notice a bright light in their direction, so he even turned away from it a bit. Dylan fumed to tell the guys. Had they gotten to the end yet or something? But Brandon added that it was already too light for a scary place. The boy immediately realized that he should take a look at it too. And he realized that this place was not frightening at all, but on the contrary, the most real fascinating, as he was able to marvel that he had found something beautiful. He was able to discover with his friends the sea in some big room, and even say that he could see a village in the distance. Our hero, together with his companions, to go outside, saying that unfortunately, monsters will not be here, but was only glad that such a thing will not happen at all. Suddenly, they heard someone say, "Oh, they're finally there!" The high tower guys were talking about how she had heard that they would be arriving at a place like this soon, and they were all waiting for them. The girl wished them all a good morning and introduced herself with the name Catherine, explaining that she would be their B-Wing guide. Dylan told her, "Hi, new guide." He was very happy to see her. She laughed and said that she would just have to take care of them, and also contrived to tell them that she guides people if they have any trouble getting to the border, and she's a backup guide just in case. Well, of course, people who come to places like this for the first time find it strange for many reasons, which is why she's in a place like this to help people like them. The young man said, "Oh, then a spare guide is very nice of her." To which she replied that they could call her Catherine. Well, the boy thought to ask, "Catherine, what should they do now?" The boy thought he would have to ask, "Catherine, what should they do now?" The young man asked, "What could it be?" To which the woman said that she was sure they had heard it before, most likely, but still decided to ask if they really want to join or form a guild, right? Or are they going to move separately? The boy suddenly wondered if a guild was interesting enough, perhaps. But something that replied that yes, their path depended on the answer they would choose right now. Dylan pouted, saying that if it was a guild, then in that case one would have to try harder, right? To which she replied that it was exactly that. Let him think hard about whether they should even form a guild or not. Their future would depend on that answer. The girl said that once he created or joined a guild, there would be no turning back, and that meant that no matter what happened, they would have to work as a team. And to top it off, Catherine also added that, in a nutshell, the guild in the latter is like a family. Well, that in itself is nice enough, as she might think. So have her ask him to choose wisely what he wants. The one suddenly hesitated, and yet with a smile to say, "All right, come on guys, let's make our own guild." Oh, wait a minute, don't get ahead of yourself. Brandon thought it was worth it to tell Dylan to wait for them until the girl realized if they were all so hyperactive since they were all running away from the answer. Tennis walked up to her and told her to forgive them all for that. But the thing is, they're just a bunch of idiots who like to travel without asking anyone. The girl told them to slow down a little. Stupid. They didn't even know where to run, but Dylan immediately replied that they should go faster. Catherine asked her to show her the way, wondering at the beautiful view in such a place. The girl just looked at them all and thought about how energetic these guys were. She also said that yes, they could go there right now. Someone said over the bracelet that they could see each other later, to which someone replied, "Okay, thanks Manaki for that." Catherine informed them that luckily they would be able to register right there. The kid asked what that was for, to which she replied that it was to form a guild, actually. Well, and besides, in order to create a guild, he would have to take a test. He asked her, and once they did that test, only then could they go to the next stage, right? To which the girl replied that yes, but they could go to the next stage without creating a guild if anything. Brandon realized it was worth asking her where they were even going now, and the gal answered him that they were now heading to the Central City MFA Landtown, which is a retreat that exists all the way down the stairs. The kid asked if it was a rest area. She replied that, well, you could say that, but it was very dangerous inside the stairs, so a place to relax was a must. Because if they kept moving forward, they would get right to Luthen's front steps. Also, importantly, Catherine said she'd forgotten something. They can register there and take the test right away, right? The young man was able to look more closely and noticed that that tower was very tall, after which he immediately filled out some paperwork so that they would finally have documentation that their guild existed. More specifically, they decided to apply for it to exist. The young man thought it was worth saying that he had filled everything out. Now they could move on, right? But Catherine replied that they should just go inside and wait for a while. Dylan also said, okay, now they can move on, that sounds like fun. One of the people who were writing up the documents and folding them told Catherine to wait a second, to which she asked if something was wrong. She asked Manaka what was wrong with her, but she replied that those were the newbies they'd have to mess with, right? To which someone confirmed that yes, those are the B-Wing guys. The girl pouted and said that if that was the case, in that case there was something she would have to say. while Tap beckoned for her to touch her closer, but she wondered if she wanted to tell her that there was some problem with them. The girl decided to whisper something important to her after all, as suddenly, Catherine's face immediately changed, not realizing what it meant. Did she really have to do this in the future? The girl also said that here's what she would tell her. Let her train them as well as she can for starters, and then she can see the result. The host announced to everyone else that attention, those already registered, have them go upstairs. Dylan was sitting on a bench with his friends, talking about here she was and where she'd disappeared to. Just then, she told the guys something important, to which he asked what it was. The girl warned them all to keep their heads down and also immediately cover their faces as much as possible, for it could be dangerous in the future. The boy was very surprised to see her expression like that for the first time. After all, she was normal before that. He also added that she was acting strange after she stepped away. Something is wrong, he thought, and decided to ask her. The girl was a little embarrassed, but still asked if he had ever met the man with blue hair sitting across from them. She asked such an indiscreet question. The boy looked closely across the room and wondered if she was referring to this man. The young man thought that the man looked calm enough and not threatening, really. Dylan asked her if there was anything wrong with that guy at all. But she said there was nothing, just don't make eye contact with him. The boy wondered why this was, for what could be wrong. Catherine answered him that it was Debrin, and he was called the proverbial newcomer hunter. One of the guys walked on and accidentally caught the guy and apologized to him. The kid said it was no big deal, everything was fine. But suddenly he noticed the guy and said he didn't think he had seen them before. This stranger told Dylan that they should be more careful, after which he only laughed and walked away from the place. But at that moment, the boy only wondered what kind of a lunatic he was. The girl said there were more applicants for this test than she thought, and they might lack skill, but she was sure there was a better reason to be afraid. A better reason? What was she talking about? He asked, to which she replied that it was Debrin's reason, but he still couldn't see what it had to do with him at all. The girl did say, after all, that Debron is only participating in the test to mess with the newcomers. Oh, and to top it off, every year, his target is rookies, and after they fail the test, he fails it too. And most unusual of all, this guy never touches anyone he sees a second time, so more and more people try to avoid him. Dylan said what he meant by scary guy, after which he realized it was all very intriguing. Catherine also added that in addition, her friend said that they were the only newcomers to this kind of situation, and also the referral here was quite a complicated action. And so it's 100% chance that they'll be attacked by Debran? He asked. The girl bluntly said that that guy would try to kill Dylan if given the chance. The kid only smiled and realized he probably wasn't going to make it, and soon their trial finally began. The man who stood watching all this announced that if everyone was assembled, they would begin the ace game. The old man said they would now move on to the level check. Simple enough. As soon as Lilia's name is spoken, he will have to proceed to the soul measurement platform, he announced. Brandon really panicked and wondered what this was even an ace game. The host said that he would be the first to ask Mr. Judo to come out. While he was talking about it, the girl told him that the ace game was an assessment of each guild leader's soul level, and also by itself. There, the machine determines a number by which it will be possible to know how strong a person is, and the leader who gets the highest number chooses himself an opponent with whom he will fight one-on-one. All right, the machine reads 285 points. Let the next one go. The girl continued the conversation, saying that if he won one-on-one, he could create a guild without taking the test. The host said to pass the next one and asked Modalai to come to their stage. The girl said that if he faced an easy opponent, he could easily pass the test. The boy said, "Isn't it great at all to fight someone?" The girl replied that yes, only if he got the highest score. Catherine told the guy that it wasn't going to be that easy, since it was Debrin who had gotten the top score every time for the past few months. He suddenly wondered about that guy being so strong. Does he always target newcomers? Why would he be allowed to participate in the test? Catherine said they were only recruiting people to explore the stairs, as if to explain the situation. What kind of person he is isn't that important, she roughly figured. He'd probably say it was a stricter system than he'd ever imagined. But still, however, it's a rule. The announcer announced that Mr. Dorn would be next. The boy immediately laughed, anticipating the opportunity to see the result of his training. The young man looked closely and realized that it was the same crazy guy. Now it would be interesting to see what he was up to. The host announced the result, 689 points, but Muda Ray was still in the lead with his 1,100 points. The boy wondered if he really was such a weakling compared to him. The girl objected that that wasn't true. People who score around 700 points are stronger than he can imagine. The young man thought, yes, if that was the case, it would be interesting to see what his own result was. The girl hoped that O'Brien wouldn't take first place, and then everything would be fine. The host announced the next contestant, at which point the main character commented that if O'Brien was their leader, they would have easily taken first place. Brandon added that he was confident of their success. The girl, sitting back in her seat, pondered the fact that these guys, whom she had only known for a couple hours, were very hyperactive. The host invited Mr. Weejin to come to the machine, to which he merely smiled and said he would be right there. Dylan pointed out that that guy looked a lot like Brendan, just like a doppelganger. The boy inquired what doppelganger meant. The young man replied that the fellow was from Blender like himself. The boy clarified that Blender was the name of his town. The boy confirmed that yes, it was a beautiful town northeast of Treya. The guy asked why he didn't have ears like his, to which the young man replied that it was a long story. At that moment, the lad heard the announcer call out to O'Brien. The presenter asked Mr. O'Brien to come closer to the machine. The boy remarked that it would be interesting to see how many points he had, while Catherine watched and hoped it wouldn't be that many. The kid thought that no matter how difficult it was, he would have to take the test again to see how much his score increased. The boy said, okay, now they're going to see how good he is. The presenter announced that Mr. Bean had so far shown the maximum score, 1120 points, and invited the kid to come up to the machine. The boy stood in front of the machine, pondering if he could surpass the previous result and who to choose as an opponent for the future. He picked up the contraption, tried to do something with it, and then concentrated fully. The young man and the girl watched what was happening, realizing that now the guy had to show what he could do. All the spectators were greatly disturbed, having no idea what this man could show. A stranger who had previously confronted the guys said that obviously O'Brien would win this time. Soon the scoring stopped, and he scored 12980 points. The presenter was incredibly shocked by this man's result, thinking that it was just unbelievable. The host announced that this was just incredible, and this contestant is now in the lead with 12980 points. Everyone realized it was crazy, as that number was much higher than last year. They were glad they were not newcomers. The young man said, wow, he expected about this result from this person. The girl added that she had never seen a number higher than that. The kid noticed that he was paying attention to him. The boy glared at him, and it was clear from the look on his face that O'Brien had turned his attention to Dylan. The young man thought it would be funny. He said that the type was obviously a funny man. Catherine asked why he was looking in their direction. The host announced that Dylan was the last of the newcomers left on the roster. The kid realized it was his turn, and it was going to be awesome. The announcer asked Mr. Dylan to come to the machine. His friend said let him show them who's boss, to which he replied that he'd be back soon. The kid sweated a little, knowing that although his height wasn't great, he had enough strength to surprise some people. The onlookers stared at him, not understanding who it was, but realizing that the guy was probably in big trouble since O'Brien was targeting him. The stranger chuckled, realizing that this guy was clearly out of luck. Catherine looked at all of this and asked only that Dylan not fall too far behind the others, and then everything would be okay. The kid took the thing in his hands and said he had to hold the thing. An onlooker asked what they would think about afterward, to which the kid replied by asking if he was really thinking about the idea. And he added that O'Brien would take first place again, so they could go out to eat. The young man realized that he might not stand out much among them right now, but he wouldn't hold back his strength. All the numbers began to rapidly rise upward, and it seemed that the power was already over 500 points. Brandon was very surprised and anxious, not realizing what the final outcome of their chapter would be. The girl was a little worried, not fully knowing how capable and strong the guy was, but she was sure he wasn't one of the weaker ones. And Catherine was very alarmed, realizing that they were likely to be attacked by the same kid. The presenter was silent for a while, surprised by what was happening. After all, who would have thought this kid could even score that many points at all? Everyone was shocked, not realizing that such numbers were possible. The host announced that Dylan was in the lead from that point on. He just scored 15600 points. The rest of the guys were shocked at what those numbers even were. Brandon was incredibly stunned to realize how cool Dylan was. The girl breathed a sigh of relief, realizing she had worried for nothing. At the same time, Catherine was very surprised, not realizing just how strong this kid was. Debran himself looked at all this and realized that apparently someone better than himself had appeared. The boy looked at all of them and said, wow, it turns out he got the highest score, that's the fun of it. The host announced that Mr. Dylan could now choose his own opponent for the one-on-one battle. The young man asked if he had to do it right now. Catherine advised him to pick the one with the lowest score until he faced the Debran. Brandon said that's probably not possible. The girl assumed he wouldn't do that anyway. The kid only smiled and pointed at his would-be adversary. All the onlookers were discouraged, not believing that the kid would choose him. Catherine was shocked by this boy's self-confidence. The girl assumed that at any rate, this idiot would be able to pick someone out. The young man announced that he was choosing DeBrian. He told him to have them fight against each other. The host was shocked at what this kid was about to do, thinking that he was really crazy for thinking this was the right choice. The girl couldn't believe what the guy had just stated. All everyone was talking about was the fact that this kid just picked DeBrian. He really did it. It's just unbelievable. The boy himself stood still, wondering how he even came up with such an idea. He didn't know, but it would be fun. Meanwhile, the kid sat there looking at the situation, not understanding why the newcomer had chosen him. But since that kid dared to do something like that, he'll go out there and show how strong he is. The other people looked on, not realizing what was going on. Would they really see them fighting now? They just couldn't imagine that a rookie with a score higher than DeBrian's, and who no one here had ever seen before, really wanted to fight him. He didn't take the top spot, and besides, this newcomer had never been seen here before. Surprisingly, he would actually fight him in a calm manner. The audience simply couldn't imagine that he would actually dare to challenge DeBron to a duel. The girl was still in a stupor and didn't understand why he would do such a thing. If he wanted to win, he'd better pick someone weaker. The host announced that the battle would be one-on-one, and the goal of this fight is only one, to defeat the opponent. Either they can refuse or force their opponent out of the arena. If everyone understood what he said, in that case, good. And now, the ace game is starting, so opponents can start fighting among themselves, announced the host. The spectators could not have imagined that the very fight they could not have expected was about to happen. The girl looked at it all with bewilderment. In fact, the boy could have chosen someone weaker, but she was very excited about the outcome of this fight. Debrin suggested to the kid that he hit him first. Catherine thought about what he was doing, and it was business as usual. That's DeBron's style. Give and take. The kid said the first one to fall would lose. Isn't it good for him to give him a chance to hit him first? He asked. She was well aware that he was the one who had scored more points, and it would be better if he used Debrin's style. But Dylan thought it was worth refusing, saying he didn't want to hit first. She wondered if that was true. The boy said he'd rather hit him first. He would give him another chance to prove himself, as he thought he would not lose so easily. The girl yelled at him, calling him an idiot. Meanwhile, Brandon, sitting next to her, thought that Catherine had finally realized what an idiot Dylan was. The young man realized that okay, in that case he understood. The kid suggested deciding who would hit first by playing rock, paper, scissors. Debrin agreed, saying that was all he had been thinking about. After they played, the kid realized he had lost. Oh shit, he thought. The young man said that since he had lost, let DeBron beat him. Everyone else was watching and didn't understand what was wrong with this guy. The boy gathered all his strength into a fist and told himself that appearances can be deceiving. So he would start right now and not give in to force. He decided to prepare himself well and put on sturdy gloves. The girl at this moment was thinking about the fact that the fight was about to start, and all the newcomers before it just were losing after the first strike against him. The kid swung harder, thinking about how he wanted to hurt this guy really badly, thus giving him respect for beating him the first time on points. Still, he realized that in honor of respect, he needed to hit with all his might. The young man covered himself with his hands as much as he could and prepared to strike. The kid hit him with all his might, but he only stepped back a little. They were all just shocked at what they could see right in front of their eyes. Tennis was also a bit surprised by what was going on in the arena, but decided to praise Dylan for holding up pretty well. All the spectators sat in their seats and were greatly surprised by what they saw. The kid was very surprised and said, "Okay, that's it." Some guy looked at him and thought he was strong enough to withstand such a blow. The young man said it was now his turn to strike back. All the spectators were dumbfounded by what they saw, as the most legendary man in this arena couldn't punch some kid. They couldn't believe it. After all, how is it possible that Debrin attacked him, but he's still standing on his feet? What is wrong with this kid, everyone thought. The stranger watching all this didn't realize what had just happened. Had he struck him weakly? The kid said, "So it's his turn now, right?" He warned that he could hit hard too, so let DeBron get ready. Debrin braced himself for the blow, putting his arm forward. The kid gave him a good smack too, and he was able to stand still. But during this blow, DeBron felt an incredible strength, for his arm directly trembled. The boy asked him, "How's he like that punch? Harder than he thought, right?" Debrin took a closer look at the hand and realized that it was indeed something incredible. After all, if it had been a normal punch, his arm wouldn't be shaking from pain right now. The kid smiled, realizing that this was probably going to be fun now. That's why he immediately struck back, lest Debran think he was really weak. He also added that it's a really fun activity. Who would have thought? He said. As soon as the kid hit him, the young man immediately flew far enough away from the blow. The boy in turn even slid back a little and realized that it was really powerful, after which he immediately touched the ground, realizing that it was even too much. His friends were very much surprised, not realizing what had happened there, but clearly aware that it was very much so. One of the strangers chuckled and said that, as he thought, what had happened earlier must have just been an accident. All the spectators felt a little discomfort again, not realizing who was stronger. After all, the kid immediately fell down, but that guy seemed to be really stronger. But the young man began to rise to his feet anyway. Soon the kid said, "It's his turn again, right?" Debran was very surprised at what was happening while the announcer was saying that they'd never seen anything like this. Who was this kid fighting Debran? He said, "Come on, let him do it soon." Brandon said that Dylan didn't seem to have an easy time beating him, but he was still confident that Dylan got the top score. Catherine understood, and so she said that the points showed soul potential and didn't particularly affect performance in battle, as their skills were more a function of their experience than points scored on the machine. The kid told the young man not to hold back and hit him with all his might, as it would be much more interesting. "He's not going to just end it like that, is he?" he asked. The boy answered him. "And now the best part is that he can persuade." Our protagonist said, "If it's what he really wants, then in that case, okay, I'll give you the blow you so desire." After all, he was preparing it for special occasions, he continued. The kid pulled himself up, realizing that it would probably be better now. After that, they glanced at each other and realized that they were about to have the most real great fight between them. The boy immediately attacked the guy so that he felt a high probability of being hit. The young man looked at all of this and began to realize that the soul flow had changed in that guy, and it made him think that the guy was probably stronger than he looked. The boy decided to spell out what he had just done to reinforce the extreme version. He immediately tried to punch the kid, though he realized he was hoping the kid was really strong and could block his punch, as he didn't want to hurt him. As soon as the kid started touching the guy, the one, in turn, immediately realized that this boy's movements had changed slightly, and those very movements just stopped on the spot. The young man realized that it sounded fun enough, so he wouldn't just give in. Taking a closer look at him, he realized that he too had decided to shine, and quite a bit. They were both beginning to realize that this was about to get a little too much fun. After which, there was a small but extremely huge explosion right in this arena, causing the presenter himself to become very frightened. Taking a closer look, he didn't realize at first what had even happened. The host told all the viewers that Dylan's attack was the result of a huge explosion, so he can't figure out who won there. Suddenly, I could see that this is what it was all about. The young man was behind him, and everything was such that he found himself outside the arena, thrown outside of it, to which the boy replied that it was a really hard battle. Also, that kid said, so by the rules of the game as he expected, Debran won again. Just as suddenly, he immediately noticed something unbelievable. The announcer told all the spectators that Debran was also outside the arena. And it turns out they both are. A clean sweep or just a real draw. The guys were very surprised at what even happened, as Debran also flew outside the arena. How could that even happen? Brandon said that Dylan's attack probably should have been, and was strong. The girl said that not at all, he had left the arena on purpose. They were very surprised at this and asked why on purpose. Tennis said Debran parried Dylan's attack and their attacks bounced off each other. And as a result of that, Dylan was thrown backwards, but Debran was only pushed back a little bit. Also, importantly, they have completely different weights, which is why it happened the way it did. Well, of course, for whatever reason, he himself went outside the arena to surrender or make a draw. The girl honestly couldn't understand but why he did that in the first place, to which Brandon said that maybe he was scared of Dylan's power. The young man still got to his feet and said, "Isn't that too much? Wasn't he supposed to stand still?" And now it was his turn to attack. The audience didn't understand what was going on and thought, what does this even mean? Was he really defending himself? Debran thought about it and realized he could find no justification for his action. The blow was more dangerous than he could have imagined, and it was his mistake. So he apologized. He also added that he admits defeat, so he surrendered. After saying that, the kid only smiled. Still, I decided to tell him something. He asked if Debran thought he could hold off a punch like that every round if he fought at full strength. But he only smiled and laughed back, for this boy amused him. The others couldn't imagine that this was crazy. After all, the newcomer had actually defended himself. They wondered if there could be any connection between Dead and the newcomer. The kid said that after a long time in this place, it's finally getting more fun, and that makes him happy. The announcer announced that the Ace game had ended in a tie and asked both contestants to return to the waiting area no matter what happened. Everyone saw the guy and told him it was an awesome fight, and he did a good job. They started praising him, saying that Debrin was definitely scared. You could tell by his facial expression. They also noted that Dylan is cool with that kind of power. But the man responded by saying he didn't think his opponent was scared. Afterward, they sat down and said that he had indeed defeated Debran. The girl asked what he meant by that. Suddenly, he wondered what was wrong. The soul he'd felt when Debran had struck back had been awesome. He realized that he was glad to bounce back from his opponent's attack. But still, if Debran's soul could get him, he might die. And importantly, Debran kept him alive for another fight. He was disappointed and felt he had lost in the end. The girl said that Debran had taken complete control of the match. Brandon was sure that next time Dylan would be able to beat him. Alicia shouted and said how dare he look down on him. He would pay for it with his life. Brandon replied that he would definitely tear him in two. The girl was slightly frightened and wondered what this sudden burst of strength was. She certainly doesn't understand these guys. Dylan said he'd deal with him easily next time, to which Brandon replied that he'd kill him then. The girls just looked at this and realized that they were unlikely to have a healthy environment. Catherine also reflected that it was probably incredibly hard with these guys. The girl was glad that at least Catherine was normal. Otherwise, she would have definitely lost her mind. The old man said he would start explaining what the preliminary round is. The preliminary round will be for survival, and everyone, including the leaders, will participate. The order of battle is completely random. He asked the Wise Guild and Peter's Guild to enter the arena. The boy came up to them and said he was looking forward to this wonderful round. The old man announced that all guild members except the leaders were now leaving in the order listed. Someone pointed out that these guys are pretty pathetic. The girl said that their personalities are much worse than they seem at first glance, Mr. Dylan. All the other guys fought amongst themselves with rather brute force. The girl watched them and thought that they did seem insignificant compared to those two, though she doesn't know how. But she is slowly being influenced by their words. The guy asked Catherine what the test would be after the prelims. She said it was about the final round, right? So she immediately said she didn't know what was going to happen there, since all her rookies were out after the qualifying round, and she had never seen the finals. A young man came up to her and told her that this would be her first win with the team, right? But she asked why a win at all. He went on to say that Dennis would nail them all, and they would win, which meant she would too. She suddenly wondered what this guy was even talking about. Would her pledges really win? The girl pondered that despite the large number of participants, it might be true. She glared and said that they would try to win properly then. She also realized that, strangely enough, she was getting into it. The kid said they had a chance, so they'd be fine. They all started cheering and saying they were going to nail everyone and win anyway. As the girl watched this, she thought the hesitant look and disappointment was just right for her. Dylan said that then they should analyze the opponents and watch their fights. The girl replied that it would take some time, but let them concentrate on that. But suddenly a whole 4 hours had passed. At one point, the announcer announced that Dylan's guild was next. He woke up and said that they were the ones going next, right? Well, then he's ready. The old man said that the opponent of Dylan's guild would be the Vajin Guild. Shorty said he thought he was going to die of boredom. Well, in that case, they'd better get going. One of these people looked around and realized this was going to be fun. Looking closer, he spotted some little kid. And immediately he smiled very much, for it might be the very man who would fight him. Dylan took a closer look and wondered what in the world had happened to these guys. They had so many people. This whole team kept going downhill, and that guy was clearly up to something. The boy took a closer look and noted to himself that it was strange, but he had some familiar feeling. They were going downstairs, and the announcer said that Dylan's guild would be on the left, and Wedgen's guild would be on the right. The kid looked at the little guy and thought he looked weird enough, after which he turned to Brandon. He told him he wanted him to fuck him, right? And went on to say to watch yourself and then he'll see who's who. The boy took a closer look at him and asked him who he was and how he knew him. And he swore like a cobbler. Brandon considered whether to answer and said that in his town, the man had bullied him and his sister. The guy was surprised that he was mocking him and suddenly thought, wait, he had a sister? The host said that the guild members can agree on who will participate. It's a death match that lasts until only one remains. One of the strangers' clan said he would go warm up for a start. Dylan asked who would go first, since Dennis would wipe everyone out if he got out, right? The girl wondered if that was what he thought of her. The kid stood still and really wondered if this was his chance. He discovered that his opponent was the very person who had bullied him and his sister at school. That creep had consistently gone unpunished by the scoundrel, which was why Brandon hated him the most right now. But instead of having trouble deciding who would go, Brandon suddenly blurted out that he would go if he could. The boy was very much surprised, but the man said again that he would go. He asked it wouldn't be bad if he went first, would it? Dylan asked Tom if they were sure everything was all right. It wasn't that he was worried, but tennis could do everything for him. Tom replied that he could handle everything on his own. After that, Tom looked at the guy and figured out what to say to let him do it on his own after all. The young man could see how bright Tom's eyes were shining now, and thought about letting him get in the ring after all. Dylan said he believes in Tom, which is why he will let him in the match. Tom thanked Dylan, saying it meant a lot to him. After that, Tom immediately entered the ring, realizing that now he would be able to show everything he had learned with his sister in school. Looking at this situation, the young man realized that Brandon had now grown a lot in his eyes. The girl realized and thought it was worth saying that he hardly knows him, but believes in his actions so easily. Why? And besides, this guy seems to be very nervous. After this little conversation, the kid moved closer to her, to which she suddenly couldn't understand why he suddenly did. The boy in turn only smiled at the girl and showed by his look that he wasn't worried about Brand. Afterwards, the kid expressed that he realized it by looking into Brendan's eyes, but the girl couldn't understand what that kid had realized about. Dylan made up his mind to speak up to her, saying that whether he was doing the right thing or not, you could tell by the look in his eyes. She knew right away that the kid was clearly out of his mind, since he was thinking of choosing under such stereotypes. Also, the young man said that, well, maybe he was too trusting, of course. But she has also traveled a month this way for him, even though she hardly knows him, so they have created such good memories for him after all. Dylan also realized that things would work out somehow in time, but the girl only looked at him and wondered if it was that part of his personality that drew people to him, apparently. The kid realized he should say why it was he didn't give up as soon as he saw him. Because to come all this way for him, he was flattered, actually. Brandon only glared down and wondered if he was about to show what he could do after all this time. The host was telling us that the battle between the guild, Brandon and Widget, would be starting right now. The kid immediately took him by the head and said that somehow he was glad to see him in a place like this again, and asked how long it had been since then. Plus, importantly, he kept wondering how he'd gotten away after he'd gone missing. Han hadn't really expected to find him on the stairs. The young man didn't give any sign, realizing that this was about to end very ridiculously. But perhaps he was capable of something more after all. Well, since he was out, in that case he would have to show who he really was. That's why the kids got it all figured out. The girl said that since everything had happened that way, she shouldn't bother his brother. And he said it was too dangerous. The young man told him that shamefully he dared not speak her name with his rotten mouth. The guy was suddenly surprised at how cocky the kid had become, and decided to take the guy by the head to show after all this time who is still on the horse. So immediately slapped the guy good on his face to make him realize how much things had changed after all. The boy realized that this still wasn't going to be as easy as he had thought it would be. The guy thought about saying what a jerk Dylan was, because he wanted to go easy on him since it had been so long since they'd seen each other. But he'd gotten worse at talking about him all the time. So he immediately punched the guy in the face to make him realize that he shouldn't say like that kind of words. He also added that he really pissed him off during that time. Catherine started to tell him what the hell, and how could the battle be so one-sided? He's really going to be okay, right? She asked Brendan. But the man in turn just kept quiet and watched it all, realizing that he had to believe in Brandon no matter what. This guy was shouting down to Brandon, telling him that he'd take this test with a douchebag like himself, and they all really think they're that good against him, right? Yes, plus he had met some useful people for him here, and he was starting to get used to it and be good. And just when this kid met Brendan, the mood immediately soured, and the character started to show from the past. Also, the guy said afterward he knew his place. The girl watched the fight and said that she thought it was wrong after all. She also thought it was worth telling him that she thought they should give up if they didn't want to regret it later. But the man in his turn only kept silent and stared. For now, the kid just lay on the floor and tried to gather his thoughts about how, oh shit, he can't do anything, not even something as basic as moving. The kid thought about saying that he should have just stood still, but still he didn't listen. The kid realized he hadn't changed anything in that amount of time, had he? While he was thinking about it, he asked, "Hey, asshole with the ears, is he even alive?" This one came closer to him and spoke up, saying what the earwig jerk was already hoping for when he climbed the stairs with just skills in general, and asked the guy. After which he said that he probably didn't tell the people behind him, did he? That he was a freak who was born with lugs and was bullied for it all the time? More importantly, he wanted to start over. But that's not going to happen, because he's a jerk, and no one is going to change that. Oh, and besides, most importantly, the guys behind him will quit after they see him lose so badly, won't they? Just as suddenly, the very spirit that was talking about Aveti the kid is right about this. And the second person who despised him contrived to tell him that Dylan and Tennis wouldn't they be disappointed in him, for he shows what a disgrace he is compared to them? And more importantly, as soon as they look at him, he's let them down, and that's just disgusting. But the one to say he didn't. The kid said he didn't think so, because if he... The kid interrupted him, asking him what he was whispering under his breath. The kid made up his mind to say he couldn't hear him so-and-so, so let him say it louder. After which he realized that since the kid didn't want to talk, just let him give up already. The young man collapsed to the floor, realizing that right now he was better off. Even so, he realizes that he should be thinking about how he's going to get out of this situation in the first place. The guy lost it and talked about how it reminds him of the old days, doesn't he think so? I also realized it was worth saying that he was doing it dangerously, Dylan, because they'd all be in big trouble later. Catherine then decided to turn to Tennis and said, "Hey Dylan, let them do something. If the leader admits defeat, the game is over." But she just stood her ground and looked at Brendan. The girl couldn't understand what was the matter, what was wrong with them at all, what was on their minds at all right now. The boy only touched his head, for he realized that it hurt a lot, but he would have to endure it all. After which, he suddenly thought about how he was scared, and there was nothing he could do, but after all, he was useless. And that's what strikes him the most. He realized that Dylan was upset now. He had trusted him with the battle, and so he hadn't done anything in the end. The boy speaks up and looks closer to see what's in his eyes. But looking closer, the kid couldn't figure out why the guy had that look in his eyes. Because of which the young man looks at him with a smile, and also trusting that he will win either way. The guy realized, oh shit, why is he smiling? I mean, it's just unforgivable. He's getting beaten up, and he really should realize that he's not going to win. The kid just can't understand. So why is he standing there smiling at him? What is he waiting for? There's nothing he can do. He hasn't done what he expects him to do after all. The boy began to realize why he was still smiling and looking at him. While he was thinking about it, Dylan suddenly decided to tell Brandon something. Speaking of okay, it's pretty easy to just let it go, since the most important thing he wanted to see was how he now let him show what he really could. I mean, he can do it without any problems because Dylan knows that. The girl couldn't understand what this guy was even talking about, if in truth such a thing couldn't be done at all with that level of skill. The kid wondered to himself, could he really do this? As he suddenly remembered that it was true after all, he was not capable of anything. His other little personality was telling him to let that one forgive him for not being able to do anything, and also for never being able to do anything even at the loss of his sister. The young man realized that it wasn't going to happen after all. He would never be able to do anything about it. But if it doesn't change now, when will it? He realized that he had promised once that he would never say that again. The kid pulled himself up and immediately used magic on that guy to make him realize that after all, he had changed in such a time. The one in turn took a closer look and couldn't understand what he thought of himself. The young man immediately tried to beat that guy, telling him that he would do anything to beat him. He panicked very much and asked what he was doing. How dare he attack him? The kid got angry and said he really wanted to die and immediately rushed to fight. As suddenly he stopped still, not realizing what the guy wanted to do. At the same moment, the kid looked at him and used magic abilities. Catherine noticed the soul that was now trying to possess Brendan. She felt this soul coming from the kid, who suddenly asked, "Whoa, this is the first time she's seen a soul, right?" Tennis said that Kirov usually has trouble with soul control. But the kid asked what it even was and what she was talking about. The girl briefly explained that Karams naturally have a hard time controlling their souls, which is why Catherine was so surprised. Significantly, from the looks of it, Brandon is an unusual person, as he can control his own spirit at will. The boy asked what that meant. The guy looked at Brendan and thought, okay, what is this anyway? He really thinks this is going to help him, doesn't he? The boy decided to say, "Stop talking! He knows it's not normal, it's just..." The kid was suddenly surprised and asked what that even meant. He added that he still wants to know how this even happened after all. On the spot, Brendan realized that now he would have to show all the strength he had been able to accumulate over time. The young man thought he should attack his opponent, saying, "You'll regret what you're doing!" The kid's soul immediately sparkled in his eyes. A heap of energy blazed in them. After that, he immediately showed the enemy the cannon he had just created with his abilities and free soul, saying, "Now activating maximum reinforcement." The guy understood his intentions and thought it would be cool to jump right out at him. The young man said, "He probably won't escape the beam, but they'll see who survives this fight." In an instant, the young man fired the cannon, and it was truly amazing. The enemy who wanted to kill him could do nothing. The kid was thrown back far enough. He didn't expect such a massive blow. After this blow, my opponent immediately became angry, not understanding what he had even done. Is he really messing with me? Dylan smiled immediately, and genuine joy shone in his eyes. He thought, wow, what was that? He doesn't know, of course, but that was awesome. What was that bazooka Brandon just made? Brandon told the guy that he had mixed a soul with a core soul. The guy didn't understand and asked what he had just mixed. The girl clarified. The core soul can be given shape but not mass, and vice versa. The shape of the soul cannot be changed, but you can create power with mass. It turns out, if now the core soul and soul were united by form and mass, it was capable of powerful actions. Significantly, she replied, it's the sum total of the combined merits of the two powers. The boy looked at it and realized, wow, that's so cool. The girl also realized that Cyrus being able to use a soul was just unbelievable. Maybe she had underestimated Brendan too much, but at least she had always found it strange for some reason. She still didn't understand why he hadn't used this kind of power before. The guy was determined to say that he would no longer let his defenses down and would do everything he could to defeat his opponent. The kid immediately attacked the boy, saying, "He's finished, you fucking asshole!" The kid realized, okay, since he was attacking again, he wouldn't hold back either. So taking another shot at this guy shouldn't be too hard. But the opponent, looking closely, was able to dodge the blow by jumping high up. The kid said, even if he shoots him 100 times, he's still a jerk. He can't be harmed by such things. As this guy flew straight at Brendan, the latter began to set up his next strikes. He realized that right now he should focus on the battle as much as possible and do everything he could to win and not embarrass himself in front of his friends. The boy took a closer look at the young man and couldn't understand why he had changed drastically. Now the kid decided to attack the opponent with 3 beams at once. Having thus created a huge explosion that would 100% hit the guy directly, he was immediately knocked out. The guy still managed to land and realized, holy shit! He was getting very angry and said, that cocky asshole did get him after all, as he suddenly became convinced it had gotten so dark for some reason. At one point, looking closely, he noticed that his opponent suddenly flew up and started pulling all sorts of feints. The kid changed his weapon from a firearm to something for close combat very quickly. Brandon immediately decided to do whatever it took to defeat the guy in a melee with a weapon. The enemy was very much frightened and didn't realize what to do now. If someone got hit, he was screwed. While the young man was trying to overpower this guy, he only asked, did he really think he could harm me with something like this? The kid swung harder and gave his opponent a punch, and it was actually pretty hard for a guy like that. The young man was suddenly surprised to notice that the ball inside the dome had started to approach the guy for some reason. And the thing was that now the main weapon was not close combat, but the most real cannon, encapsulated in a single core. And in the next instant, the boy was as if he had been scorched by that ray. The kid stood still and couldn't understand why he couldn't do anything. The beam was absorbing him more and more each time. He realized, holy crap, he'd actually fallen for this trick. Brandon ducked away from the blast in the same instant so that he wouldn't get hit himself. He wanted to catch his breath a bit, for this battle was indeed sweaty and difficult. Just as suddenly, he noticed that the guy had gotten behind him after all and said, that's all there is to it. The kid was like, he's had enough of this. Let's end this fight right now. The guy immediately realized that he should give the bastard a good kicking for everything. Fucking asshole! You're gonna die already! The young man fell straight to the ground, realizing that he should be dodging the guy now. Still, it wasn't as easy as Brandon realized. No matter how you look at it, the opponent is physically stronger. At one point, Dylan decided to tell Brandon to remember to use his soul. He said it was so unexpected. Why did he hide this power all the time? He doesn't understand, but still let him focus on it. Also, importantly, it turned out just as he'd thought of it from the beginning. I mean, he can beat this guy no matter what, right? He asked Brendan. The one looked back at him and realized that his friends, and moreover their captain, were relying on him now. So he said, yeah, he can beat that asshole anyway. The guy started walking up to him and asked, okay, he still hasn't given up, asshole. How many more times can he fire his gun? Brandon realized that he would never again make the same mistake he had made recently, because his whole team and friends believe he can do it. They believe in him no matter what. The guy decided to grab another weapon and attack the Hellcat, while he thought he had his mind set on using the thing again. Dylan looked at the whole thing from the side and realized that it was probably going to be long, but cool. Catherine started to ask, "Wow, that's just incredible." He couldn't believe he had that kind of power all this time. But still, this was what kept her wondering. What kind of power was this anyway? She did ask, though. Maybe he's wrong, of course, but there's something wrong with this event. But what? The kid suddenly paid attention and asked what exactly. She realized something. After all, it looks like Brandon is winning, but in reality, don't you think it's odd that Brendan is the one looking more exhausted than his opponent right now? Tennis wondered, why is this so? As Dylan suddenly suggested, maybe that's why he didn't use this ability. The boy continued to fight as fast as possible as if it was the last time. He realized that now, if he put all the pressure on his strength, he would be able to defeat his opponent. The one in turn only realized that most likely, if he did nothing, he would die. That's why he was furious. The boy looked at him and didn't think he could do anything back at him after being so wounded. But still, the guy was able to hit the boy in such a way that he even felt incredibly strong and excessive pain. Brandon grew angrier each time and realized that if this continued, he would never be able to fight like this again. So he had to win anyway. Tennis said to everyone, if he does continue the battle any further, he could get seriously injured. The kid looked at it and wondered why that was. The girl replied, if Brandon hasn't used this power before, does that mean it's overly dangerous for him to use such an ability with such a likely load? He asked. It turns out he's in danger now, right? And he means he should rest? Exactly, replied Tennis. Usually the soul takes energy from the environment. But that's not right, because then the soul is originally designed to balance internal and external energy flows. This will allow external forces to penetrate the body, and this is the proper use of body reinforcement. Also, importantly, she said, Brendan is now doing the exact opposite. The girl also said that Brendan would have to practice on how to use her powers. But it's all rather dangerous right now. The most shocking thing for Brendan was that he was trying to force the external energy into his own. The girl also thought it was worth mentioning that external energy was not meant to penetrate the body in such a way. It turned out that Brendan was forcing the energy into himself now. If he continued to fight, his body might not be able to withstand such a strain and simply break into pieces. The boy took a closer look at her and realized that this was already too dangerous a situation. The guy tried to fight as hard as he could, harder and harder, but he was having a hard time doing it. Of course, now his opponent was suffering even more than he was, but still the kid was facing the very real death if he didn't stop. He realized that he would have to put in more effort to defeat his opponent. But then the opponent in turn only screamed, telling him to stop this horrible pain. The boy looked at him and realized that he wanted to spare him, even though he hadn't even warmed up yet. The young man dared to use some more abilities, thinking that he would have to finish it, since the opponent hadn't changed. Also, one way or another, he's not the same as he used to be, and will now end this battle with a victory for his clan of friends. After all, he still doesn't want to upset his friends as he values them as himself. No matter what, the one will have to try to do anything to please them. The guy kept yelling and realizing to make this one stop and not do it again as he was hurting even more. The boy took a closer look at what he had just done in general and saw that he didn't look like himself at all anymore. He was also able to notice that his hands, they were all shaking, and he also didn't understand why this was happening. As he looked closely at them, he realized, was this a sign of weakness? But he would still have to take more action, wouldn't he? He only thought that it couldn't be had he just used up all his strength. Though his inner voice said that he had changed after all, so he should try harder. But he took a closer look at him and realized that he could. He had to show him what he could do. The kid started to fall to the ground, and his inner voice was telling him that if he gave up right now, he would be a disappointment to his friends. The young man wondered if it was true that he would really disappoint his own friends. As at the same moment, the friends thought it was worth catching the guy, for they realized that he had, after all, passed out of strength, and it was absolutely normal in his state of mind. The boy realized he should say, okay, that's it, let it stop. And importantly, Dylan thought to praise Brendan for putting on quite a strong performance. And most importantly, he was able to defeat his opponent no matter what. Just as suddenly, someone thought to say, what the hell is he even doing? And Yugi paid attention, realizing that now she was going to show those guys what she could do. The guy was like, hey, what's he doing sitting over there? He shouted that he was fighting an outcast, so why couldn't he do anything? He had just fallen. Why was he slowing down? The girl looked at it and realized that now she would have to show everyone else just how strong she was, even though it was rather unfair. Tennis thought she should tell the guy that that was the end of it. He was suddenly surprised, not knowing what that meant. The girl decided to take out her blades after all and said, "Orders, and they'd better surrender right now, because later they'll regret fighting her at all." After that last instant, she only looked at them more closely and showed by her mere glance that she was serious. Decided to add about the fact that she would now be their opponent from the beginning to the end of the round. So those would have to either surrender right now or admit defeat in the fight. After that fight had ended well enough, and the kid was only unconscious. Suddenly he jumped up, for the one who was unconscious had abruptly shifted into sleep mode, and after that, he just woke up altogether. Looking around, he didn't realize where he was at all, as this was a dormitory he didn't recognize. Brandon only asked what this place even was and what was going on. Suddenly, he heard someone talking outside the window and realized that he must be somewhere in the dormitory. Looking out the window, the boy heard, "Dylan, let him see how much dust has accumulated." The kid was asking himself how much longer he'd have to keep the clothes on while they were still weathered. The boy looked out the window and could see Dylan, not realizing what they were doing in a place like this. He did go down to the guy and greet him, to which the guy suddenly turned his attention to him and was glad he was finally awake. Dylan thought about answering how he was feeling. In general. The boy decided to ask what they were even doing and how the test ended. But the one only looked, putting things away, and asked about why he was asking questions about the test. The boy asked if he didn't remember what had happened there. Well, in that case, where would he start, he thought. Brendan talked about how he remembered everything from before his fight yesterday, but still his memory wasn't that much. To which Dylan immediately replied that he remembered what was before his blackout in general. In a nutshell, he thought, he should tell the guy that Tanis had spotted him, and she was so sure of herself that she told him to attack her all at once, and also the battle was over within seconds of those words. Also, the kid said that she then said something with a very scary expression on her face, something like, "They will pay her for all their atrocities with their own flesh somehow." That's what the guy seemed to be saying. Dylan was very surprised that Tanis really did that, but immediately responded with, "Isn't that scary in general?" And also, importantly, he was glad they won, but still at that moment he was more scared than glad, because if he had been on the enemy team, he would have beaten it anyway. And he also said, "But the fact that it's only Tanis, don't let her talk about it, okay?" As the same, he replied, that it is she, well, she is right beside him. But here immediately laughed and said that he knew, just kidding, although it's actually good that he told him that, otherwise it would have been bad. The girl decided to say, "Be on your guard, or his flesh might accidentally come off too." The kid asked what it was they were doing anyway. But then the boy immediately answered that Catherine had put them in the dormitory, and also he had absolutely no money, so he was hanging laundry. Also, passers-by, passing by, could see Dylan and thought, "It is worth saying that he once seemed to see this guy yesterday at the stadium." The passer-by immediately greeted him, saying that he enjoyed their fight yesterday, to which he immediately took notice and asked if he knew him at all. To which he immediately answered that he was Lycon, or whatever his name was. The kid said, "Who the hell is Lehan? His name is actually Dylan." When suddenly Tanis immediately said, "Just let him see how much attention he gets." Afterwards, she immediately sat down at the table with Brandon, asking him if he was feeling better. He replied, "Yes, thank her for her concern." Tanis said, "Please, just don't let him overexert himself next time, but rather let him get some proper rest." He replied, "Yes, thank her for her help." After that, the girl immediately stood up and said that she had something else to do, so she would tell the guy to go back inside. The guy immediately said that he would help her if needed, but Tanis only said in response that no, he still hadn't recovered and needed to rest properly. And the most important thing to him is this, that it's good that he's working hard, but still let him not do anything stupid like he did yesterday, because it could hurt not only his pride, but of course his health and well-being. The boy immediately lowered his eyes and realized his mistake. The girl only decided in response to tell him that they still had a lot of work to do, so let him keep his head up. And so, importantly, they can't let him get hurt, can't they? The girl asked the guy, after which he immediately smiled and realized, yes, of course he would try. The girl started to move a little farther away with each movement, realizing that the one had come to his senses after all, and also she added, "Let him rest then, she will go for now." The guy thanked for the help as well as advice. He looked at how the boys were actually very friendly to him, And he realized, after looking at the clouds, the kid also realized that the world is beautiful after all. And also in a place like this, it is very beautiful and peaceful. Afterwards, I touched the table a bit and realized how nice it was somehow to just do nothing and lie in one place. He also realized that the sun is so warm and it reminds him of his school days. Plus, he noticed that he'd always slept face down like this before, except he was at peace with how he slept so well. And if it was so uncomfortable, it had been quite some time since then, namely 6 hours later, and the young man had gotten quite a lot of sleep. As he woke up, he realized that enough time had passed that he couldn't even figure out how much. As suddenly as he could, he noticed that Tanis was talking about why he was still here. He replied that he must have fallen asleep and didn't realize it right away. The girl told him that if he was tired, he could go inside to sleep. His face, by the way, was wrinkled up pretty bad. To which he said, "Please forgive him for everything." The girl asked him why he was apologizing. Just as suddenly, Dylan finally did come in and asked why they were back in this place, guys. To which Tanis replied that she had just gotten here, but Brandon was in this place sleeping. "Can't you tell by the look on his face?" The boy also asked his friends. "Did they really go out for some fresh air? How sentimental they all are." To which the girl replied, "It's just not as noisy, is it?" Brandon added that she wasn't here to tease him, was she? The boy looked at the clouds and said that it was really nice in this place, and maybe it was because he was alone in the room, but he was really bored. The girl thought it was worth asking what it was he was even talking to them about in there. Like here, something only said that he hardly said anything like that, anything important. Tanis asked what guild they were even talking about, since he wasn't going to invite many people to their guild either. To which the boy immediately replied, what was she talking about? He was just joking. After which, laughing at her, he also added, "Does he look like such a gullible person?" To which he replied, "Yes, he looks super gullible." But then Dylan immediately replied, "Stop joking like that, it's not funny anymore. The kid was only asking the girl if he wasn't messing with her because he was late for work, right?" Suddenly, at that moment, Brandon thought to ask something. The kid paid attention and asked, "What is it?" Brandon still wanted to ask about the fact that he had said he'd arranged to meet someone here after all. So who was that person anyway? He was very curious. Dylan thought with a small sigh to answer that about his reason for being in this place. Well, in that case, it wasn't really important, but would tell him nonetheless. Since it's all about when he was younger, got into an accident and that man was the one who saved him. And also his name was Hajin, and also in general he doesn't know where he is or what he does. It's really a mystery to him. Dylan asked Brandon. He said he wanted to get stronger, right? To which he immediately replied, yes, he did. The kid replied, yeah. He lost his sister when he was a kid because their father was the ultimate drunk. It was because of the trauma he faced, something like that. The boy was very much surprised and said, okay, now it makes sense. But still he wondered what had happened to his father, to which the man replied, Dad's fine, I guess. He ran away from home, so he doesn't know for sure what happened to him. Dylan immediately thought about it and realized, okay, that makes sense. The kid also said he doesn't know for sure what kind of hard life he had there, but still doesn't want to get into it either. He was also curious as to what the genius fighter was going to destroy. Tanis suddenly paid attention and thought, just because she's a genius, that means... The girl decided to say it was no big deal. She just left home because her family was bugging her. The boy immediately responded, what you get is, destroying her family isn't part of it, is it? The girl started talking about how no, of course she hadn't thought of that. To which the kid asked what her family was like. The girl replied that it had been too long to talk about it. She just wasn't normal and probably, Tanis thought, I'll have to ask how his and Brandon's family was doing. The girl explained that she was just trying to get away from it all. That's why she was in a place like this before she realized it. The kid took a closer look at the situation and realized it wasn't so monotonous. He also confirmed that he now understood everything. After all, they had all gone through a lot to get to a place like this, and each of them had a difficult fate. Dylan also added that he was actually happy to meet just them. Such great guys. And one of the most important things to him is to let them know how much he worried when he was in a place like this, even though he didn't show it. And yet there are things that still bother him. But that's okay. For what it's worth, he thinks he's very, very lucky to have them. The girl lay silently and thought about the fact that this guy is very carefree as it seems at first glance. Still, he has a very pure and characterful side to him, and it seemed just wonderful to the girl. Dylan suddenly turned around and told the guys that he had heard a lot of bad things about the stairs. For example, that all strange people gather in such a place. He was also glad that he had met people who looked like him. Of course, he thought only strange people were in a place like this. To which Brenda immediately replied that she thought the same thing, and yes, the girl thought he was weird. The boy suddenly wondered what the girl even thought about it. Tennis, for what it's worth, is tired enough. So it's worth telling the boys that, okay, she's going to bed. The boy thought it was worth asking if she was so sleepy that she was leaving. In response, he only heard that they should go to sleep too, because tomorrow would be finals. Dylan immediately replied to the girl that, as expected, a brilliant fighter is different. But she had self-control. So let them stay here one more time and then they would go. To which Brandon decided to agree with him. The girl watched them out of the corner of her eye and realized that she really cared about these guys. The longer she's with them, the more she believes he'll one day turn out to be not as bad a guy as he seems. Soon the next day came, and the girl could not understand why they were still in this place and not sleeping. How the place was suddenly frightened and couldn't understand, and why they should be somewhere else. Had so much time passed? Catherine immediately asked everyone else if they were ready to fight further. Dylan greeted Catherine, saying good morning. They were going to the finals, right? To which she answered immediately that yes, she came a little early because they need to rent a boat. The kid was very much surprised that they would indeed be on a boat. The girl realized she should tell the guy that yes, the finale would be on one of the islands. The boy was very much surprised that the island was very cool. Suddenly the girlfriend asked, "Is Dylan really going to take a bath?" The guy thought about how he would definitely defeat that guy this time. Yes, and besides, importantly, let him wait. He will be convinced of it himself, as he proves it with actions. At this same point, all these guys should also go to the boats, and it was pretty good. All Dylan yelled out was that, hey, this place looked so much better than he could even suspect. To which Catherine immediately replied that she had only thought of that because she had always wanted to go to places like this. And also, she would never have thought that everyone was so dismissive of Midland. The young man looked at the boat next door and wondered what they were doing there. What if he told the boys that they were their competitors? They all looked at him with not the best looks either, and said that this guy made them very angry. Dylan watched it all and realized that why those guys were staring at him so much was not the best look. Catherine replied that it couldn't be helped, because now everyone was staring at him. The kid was shocked and asked if it was true. When did he manage to become their target in the first place? To which the girl replied that there were rumors that he was conspiring with his grandfather. How immediately the boy got motivated and thought that sad really were the rumors, and it would be better to talk about his victory over him. But well, since that was the case, it couldn't be helped. The kid also said that this time he would defend himself as well. In that case, Catherine asked, why was it that he wanted to fight Debrin so badly in the first place? Turning around, the kid was suddenly surprised and told me that it was obvious. Just because it's fun to fight the strongest opponents. Catherine didn't understand what the point was, but said that since that was the case, it was fine. Of all people, that's exactly who this boy chose, she thought. And then the boy added that besides, she'd said that Debrin had killed all the newcomers in a row. So he's caused a lot of people to lose their families, hasn't he? The boy asked her. And what's more important is that he can't stand by, no way. And besides, who is he after that? To which the girl was only surprised and a little even delighted at Dylan's words. She suddenly realized that maybe she had underestimated him too much before. But this guy seems cooler than she'd originally thought. The boy also talked about how he couldn't wait to fight him. The more he thinks about it, the angrier he gets at his surroundings. Just as suddenly, the same girl realized that she was very much impressed by this boy's thoughts. Also, the kid Brandon asked, I think they almost made it to the end? To which the kid replied, where's this DeBrand guy anyway? Our hero, along with his companions, still managed to reach the island. He also decided to speak out, saying that this island was bigger than he could even suspect. And also realized that Debrin would be hard to find in places like this. After they all landed on the island, Dylan immediately asked Catherine what they should do on the island. To which the girl replied that now she would show and tell them everything. Therefore, could they please give their hand? Soon, all of them were wearing those bracelets for future convenience. Also, these bracelets are certainly not simple, After all, they are all programmed to share information between allies. The kid asked Catherine what it was. She replied that it was a communication management system. Or more simply, the final round will be a survival format, and they will fight until there's only one team left. The girl also added that only the leaders would fight. In reality, it wouldn't be that easy. The girl suddenly wondered when she would be able to fight at full strength, as she immediately added that the others would help through the communication control system. To which the young man immediately realized that it was worth paying attention to what it meant to help. The girl decided to put the exact same bracelet on Tennis's arm too, saying that yes, here's her bracelet. And here's one also for Brandon. While she was handing out bracelets to everyone, the boy looked around and was able to see that there were quite a few empty spaces around them. He could also smell something in the two bushes in front of him. Catherine realized she should say that these guys could probably help him. Suddenly, she noticed that he wasn't looking at her. After that, she thought to ask if everything was all right. To which he hesitated and said it was nothing, he was just thinking. The boy immediately asked her how this thing even worked in the first place. Better, the kid was able to feel the unpleasant sensation, realizing that this guy had noticed him or something. Right now, Catherine was explaining to Dylan how the bracelet worked. She said that the communication control system synchronizes the souls of the guild members, and he would only need to close his palm, thinking of the guild member he wanted to call. Like suddenly, the kid tried to do it and asked if it was done exactly like this, as he immediately managed to summon Tennis, saying that, wow, this is really cool. To which the girl immediately replied that if he did everything right, that person would appear in front of him in the blink of an eye. While the young man was getting his bearings, the girl also explained to him that the guild member who appeared in front of him would only have 10 seconds to help him. But he couldn't summon the same person twice in a row, having to alternate them anyway. And while she was talking about it like that, Tennis only thought about some strange sensations she felt, after which immediately their trio said that since she had explained everything to him, they were heading on. To which the boy irritably asked, what, only he would be on the island alone? To which Catherine replied that yes, they would be watching from the waiting room. The kid looked at them and said that it was certainly bad that they were breaking up. And anyway, there's nothing to be done differently, right? To which the girl replied that yes, they could use the communication system, so what's there to worry about? She also said that they would launch a flare, which would be the sign of the beginning. In the meantime, he could take a walk around the area. The young man immediately replied that it was good. He hoped they would do well too. After the main character's friends went, he said, so let's have them meet after the victory at the same place. To which those only replied that why is he the one trying to combine two opposite things at all? The young man who presented himself suddenly wondered what he should do now. Just as immediately he realized that, okay, he had one great idea after all. He realized he thought he should take a closer look around the area to see if there were enemies nearby or not. As he walked through the forest, he only wondered that places like this were rather common, and somehow there was nothing interesting as he had thought before. The boy took a closer look at the unusual noise coming from far away. The noise came from behind a bush, and the young man suddenly wondered what was going on. He realized that someone was definitely near him. At the same moment, he noticed that a flare had been launched. The boy guessed that it was the same signal Catherine was talking about. He realized it was time to start. As he watched this interesting experimental action from the signal side, the young man pondered what he should do now. In an instant, the guy sitting in the bushes realized now was his best chance to prevail. He decided to let go of the arrow so he could immediately shoot his opponent. When he turned around, he saw an arrow flying at him. He couldn't understand what had just happened. The arrow flew near the boy, and he was puzzled by what had happened. The shocked young man stood still, not knowing what to do next. He was extremely surprised. After all, someone had just fired a shot right in front of his face, slightly grazing his cheek, from which blood began to ooze. The guy making the shot didn't understand how he managed to miss. The thing is, he had just made a mistake. Realizing his mistake, the shooter thought he should apologize to his opponent. I'm sorry I didn't finish the whole thing with one shot, he said. The young man realized that this was a truly dirty way of doing battle. The kid realized the danger of the situation, but decided he had to do whatever he could to escape. First, he thought to call for help. Something had gone wrong, and the young man didn't realize what would happen to him now. Suddenly, he noticed that other people started to approach him. The boy had no idea what to do. Two of the boys came up and attacked the young man. He didn't know what to do. Some assholes wanted to attack him. The boy immediately realized that he had to get out of here before anyone caught him. He ran as fast as he could, realizing he had to finish this whole thing. He still didn't understand who these guys were, though. At that moment, Catherine's voice came from the bracelet, asking if Dylan could hear her. The young man asked where the sound was coming from. The girl explained that they were communicating through the communication system and were now in the waiting room watching the same thing he was. She asked what happened, why he was running away like that. The boy replied that just after the signal, someone had suddenly attacked him. Significantly, some psychos have attacked him and are now chasing after him while the guy tries to run away from them. At one point, Tennis was deep in thought, and the kid wondered what had happened. The girl replied that she had expected such a thing. The boy doubted very much what she had expected. Tennis explained that their biggest fear is exactly Debran. It's obvious to everyone that Debran is the one they're after right now. If the guy loses, Debran is out of the game, which is why everyone else is after him. Importantly, they don't want to run into Debran in person, as he is their main source of fear. Eliminating him is their chance to win this match without dying. To that, the kid asked what kind of pathetic plan that was. The girl agreed, but added that it didn't matter. If they were doing it for their own survival, no one should blame them. The boy replied that she was right. Suddenly, the guys chasing Dylan couldn't figure out where he had just gone. They looked around, trying to see where the boy might have run to. They were sure they were after him, so he wasn't as weak as they thought. The big man continued to look for the young man as fast as he could, but his companion asked if he was sure that was where he had run. The boy realized how lucky he was. It hurt a little to go down, but at least he'd escaped from those assholes, so it wasn't so bad. Suddenly, he heard someone's voice addressing him. He had finally found it. Looking closer, the boy saw the same man who had said that finding him was easier than he thought. The boy replied that he must be the one he had encountered earlier. The stranger said that it looked like he'd been following the boy long enough already, so it was safe to not worry about it for now. Dylan asked what he was even talking about, since everything was fine initially. The kid stated that he would deal with him quickly, and then everything would be fine. The boy stood in a stupor, not quite sure what he was even talking about. At this moment, the guy clenched his fist, putting up his hand, thus calling for backup. The kid was starting to realize that apparently everyone on this island was trying to kill just him alone, and that wasn't very fair. Though he didn't expect the stranger to start attacking him with some kind of throwing weapon instead of a whistle. The boy immediately asked what the hell it was, but the man only laughed and replied that even if he found out, it still wouldn't help him. Significantly, the guy noticed that the young man had done a good job in the preliminary round. He was surprised at first, but realized that there was nothing special about him as he had originally thought. The stranger continued to bombard the boy with his technique, which got on the boy's nerves. The kid tried to run away from the blows, wondering how much longer he was going to shoot at him. Did he have some hidden weapon or something? The enemy kept firing and asked how long the young man was going to dodge his blows. He suggested that it would be better to surrender and finally accept his own fate. The kid didn't stop running, realizing that if he stopped, he could get seriously hurt from this kind of spitting, of course. With each step, he realized more and more that it was worth it to turn around and counterattack properly in such a case. He decided to try using something similar with his abilities to see how it would work on his opponent. At this moment, the stranger looked closely and didn't understand what was happening. Why had the boy suddenly stopped where he was? Dylan tried to call out to Brandon and ask for his help, but he didn't understand at all what was going on. The boy thought of running up to him and asking if everything was all right. The stranger watched, not realizing what was going on. The boy said that the case was not that simple, so he apologized for the unexpected call. The one didn't even expect it. Dylan suggested that Brandon take a good shot at the guy. The stranger suddenly asked what the two of them were doing. Were they really plotting something? Brandon agreed to try to help in any way he could. Dylan said that joint long-range attacks would give a good advantage. Just as the boy prepared to gather energy in his fist for a shot, he suddenly disappeared from the spot. The kid couldn't understand why this was happening, and the stranger kept laughing, asking what he was even going to do. The boy came back and didn't fully understand what had happened. He was about to shoot, but time had run out. That's not fair! At that point, Catherine asked if the kid was okay. The girl immediately advised him to think things through properly before summoning anyone, and let him just use his soul, even though it was dangerous. The boy wondered if he was really shooting his own soul. The girl explained that he concentrates his soul and fires it, so a couple of shots wouldn't hurt him. But if he was hit by many of those attacks, the damage would be fatal. The young man tried to cover himself from the blow, and the girl turned to Dylan, asking if he was going to use the technique. The stranger chuckled, saying that he must be getting a tip. But did he really think it would make any difference? The boy burst forward, declaring that if so, he would do his best to win. After all he has to do is get to his opponent before he fires back. So he asked the others, right? The stranger chuckled, figuring the kid was unlikely to pull that off. He offered to make cards in his hand, creating a very strong reflective shield. The boy laughed at the top of his voice, saying that, in case the boy hadn't forgotten, he had co-guildmates too. And unlike other guilds, they are always well synchronized. The young man realized that this guy was just pissing him off. At the same moment, someone threw the kid farther away, and he couldn't figure out who it could have been. The stranger laughed, claiming that although the boy was strong, he had absolutely no experience in battle. And even if he is that strong, he can't win until he gets them all. And I don't think he's that good with his teammates. The guy kept laughing, saying that thanks to the boy, he could easily pass on without even breaking a sweat. Dylan remembered well that this guy really annoyed him. The stranger again attempted the very technique he wants to use to overpower the young man. The boy kept running away from the blows so those wouldn't hit him. He would have to come up with a plan that would definitely work. His opponent said he would see how long he could dodge his attacks. The boy kept running, realizing that he should be extremely careful. After all, no one knows what can happen after the enemy does damage to him. But the guy didn't give up, and only kept trying to hit the young man, realizing that now he would definitely win. Dylan also realized that his soul was his chance. He remembered Tennis telling him that he could concentrate his soul and shoot it at his opponent. So he should do just that. The boy immediately realized that he should turn to the girl. She answered something, and he decided to ask if it was true that the enemy was only shooting at him with his soul. The girl replied that it didn't seem like anything special, so it probably was. But she wondered why he was asking about it. The kid answered her that if it was just a soul, then it might work out the way he had planned after all. At one point, the guy just stopped on the spot, trying not to slip. The opponent noticed this and asked if he really thought he was going to give up without any consequences. The boy replied that he would now show him a very real masterclass if he wanted to do better than that. The boy looked at it and realized that he kept waiting for him to show something. And now, finally, the moment had come. At the same moment, the enemy fired and said the kid was a fool to expect anything else. But apparently, he was about to be finished. At the same moment, the kid ran up and was completely serious, for he had an ingenious plan to make sure that that bullet didn't hurt him. The kid kept running forward as the very same soul bullet flew at him, which directly hinted that the kid better not run into it. The young man was able to realize what he should do and just absorbed that soul. Because of this, he realized that he could still bypass the guy despite his soul-throwing abilities. From such an act, the stranger was very much surprised and couldn't understand why it worked, and in general why he couldn't hit the guy even though he was aiming at him. Brandon and Catherine were extremely surprised by Dylan's action, saying that they couldn't understand how the enemy shot him and did no damage. It's just mind-boggling. The girl said it's not at all what it really seems. The young lady decided to explain to them that it wasn't just for fun at all, as this guy had just then, the boy just absorbed his opponent's soul and was able to outmaneuver him. Catherine wondered, not sure what she meant. Did she mean that he could do that too by absorb? But something told her he didn't have that ability. After all, since long ago, everyone knows that owning a soul is absorbing the energy of nature. And that is why, if the user does not make any changes to the soul, it will return back to nature. And those all-arcane words mean that he can absorb as much energy as he wants, until the opponent stops his energy flow. Brandon realized that these abstruse words sounded just cool, and also that Dylan probably knew about it. But the girl only thought that knowledge alone wasn't enough, because it took practice. And it's also significant that not everyone can do the same thing, just knowing that. But this guy did. He really did. The girl began to realize that he was just a nugget, a natural genius. Though perhaps no one had even recognized the guy initially. The stranger shouted why it wasn't working at all. The kid said that since it wasn't working, he'd show his backlash now. Since he'll end it all in one go, so he'll realize, you shouldn't cross your elders anyway. The enemy looked at him and didn't understand what had just happened in the first place. After all, could such a thing even happen? The kid looked at him and said that since he'd just buried his hand, it wasn't such a hard blow to admire. Catherine turned to Dylan, telling him that if he broke his opponent's communication system, he would lose automatically. As soon as the kid realized that, he decided to try his best. The boy suddenly turned his attention back to the stranger, asking where they were staying. Suddenly, someone shouted to the boys to stop. The young man began to approach him, and the man still wouldn't subside, telling the guy to stop where he was and give him at least a second's respite. The stranger said he would never touch him again. Actually, he wanted to say something else. He closed his eyes and didn't know what to say to get him off his back, because this was very important to him. Still, the man thought it was worth telling the truth, and bowing his head to the boy, he told him that his little brother had been captured and taken hostage. Dylan was very surprised and asked what he was talking about, what he was even talking about. The guy started to tell him that he didn't even want to fight him initially, because he wasn't a criminal after all. And besides, he did it all. It was that bad man who grabbed his little brother and forced him to do it. The kid thought it was worth asking him some questions, asking if it was even true. Catherine sighed very heavily and said that she couldn't verify it. And besides, to believe that Debrin had gotten that far? The stranger said it was the complete truth. He wasn't lying and begged for another chance to make things right. He really didn't want to do anything wrong. The kid said he had to help save his brother. Then he immediately looked the boy straight in the eye, asking if he believed him. The boy looked at him and thought, "That's not good enough, is it?" At one point, someone wanted to grab this guy's head and hold it tight. It turned out to be Debran, who just wanted to ask the guy what he had just said about him and what he was going to do to his brother, to which the young man immediately replied that he understood after all. The stranger said that his brother, that is, he didn't kidnap him, just really. The stranger said that his brother had been kidnapped, that he hadn't kidnapped him, but that he had actually kidnapped him. Debrin was still holding his head and decided to ask him something. He said the guy doesn't even know who he really is and hasn't heard anything about his brother, so let him not lie, please. The boy took a closer look and suddenly realized that the man was really lying, and he almost believed it. Suddenly, one of the guys noticed Dylan and decided to tell him that he had finally found him. The kid himself paid attention and realized that he was being tailed now. This giant decided to tell all the other guys to catch him before he escapes again, and this time they can definitely talk sense into him. At that same moment, Debrin decided to take this guy and throw him right against a tree after all. The kid took a closer look and suddenly didn't realize what it had just been at all. And the acquaintance could still see the boy Debran and immediately realized that apparently the rumors were true. The boy decided to say they should run as fast as they could. After all, it was Debrin. He had already found the newcomer, and now they were screwed if they didn't unite. The guys started running and saying, "Let's them get back to the real test, or they'll get killed and end the game right there." Debrin looked at it and didn't understand what was even going on in this trial. So on top of that, they are loud even when they run away. He thought of turning to the young man and saying that he cared about those guys, right? The one turned around and decided to say he was impatient since he wanted to fight him so badly. Well, he's fired up. Well, in that case, are we going to play like this time, or are the rules going to be changed a bit? Debrin wanted to speak up and said not at all, it wouldn't be fun, but to actually go all the way for it? To which the young man immediately smiled even wider and said that since that was the case, he assumed he was ready for something more, right? Well, in that case, the boy decided to add, this was just great news for him. The boy looked closely and realized that he would have to do a lot of things now to keep the man from thinking. The kid immediately stepped forward, right on top of Dylan while he only attacked him as well, realizing that they would have to fight very quickly and briefly now. They immediately confronted each other, starting another fight. One of them said that he also wanted to fight him soon so he wouldn't get bored. For his part, Debrin actually really appreciated the action, as he too had been waiting for a fight like this. They fought pretty well and it was all happening very quickly. Sure, Debrin was stronger physically, but still boy Dylan was beating him, even still. That one could fight back despite its power. But the soul, as well as the power that is hidden in the young hero, can be so great that none of the ordinary people can and even imagine. Each time, the boy dodged the punches that Debrin threw. They fought very fast and agile, and it was so cool that it was even a little pitiful for both of them. Catherine was really surprised along with the guy, and the guy thought it was worth saying, "Oh my god, Dylan is actually a really badass fighter." The girl thought it was worth saying that she was certainly worried that Dylan would be facing Debrin so soon, but if he was that good, maybe he could still win. The boy stepped further back each time, but realized that he was getting stronger and stronger with each bout he fought. With each successive step, the kid only laughed at what a funny situation they were in. Still, though, he wouldn't just step back, so he had to press onward to keep the man from relaxing. So he decided to use his final trick right away to make the man a little disappointed in his own abilities. He just looked at him with a rather piercing stare, realizing that right now that kid was trying his best. The young man punched the guy really hard, realizing that the guy would have to feel at least something, since he wasn't originally so strong for nothing. The guy didn't expect to see such an act from his opponent, and it encouraged him quite a bit. At this point, the kid decided to say that he'd already seen it in the preliminary round. He kind of called it an enhancement, right? And of course, he wondered, the technique that gives the soul a boost and much restores time. Is that why everything stopped then? Decided to ask the guy. The kid paid attention to him and decided to tell him that he was indeed intimidating, because all he had to do was see the technique once to understand how it worked. Catherine understood best of all what it was about why everything had stopped, didn't she? Which Brandon immediately noticed and realized that he hadn't realized it all along. And it was on the surface. The kid also added that he didn't think it would work on him a second time, did he? After all, that trick wouldn't work on him again. After which, he immediately decided to beat the hell out of the guy by kicking him right in the stomach with his foot. The one was able to stop after all and realized that he was going to have to sweat a little more now after all. The young man went on to talk about why he was hiding his inner strength, for he was sure that he was capable of more than he was now. The kid decided to answer that yes, but he makes it sound like he knows it all. But unfortunately, he's right after all. Debrin was surprised again and decided to say there was only one way to be sure. Dylan chuckled and decided to say that it was really unfortunate, really. Yes, and besides, he wanted to leave it for later, but still, if the one asking so much, he must realize after all that this is his secret weapon against someone like him. Brandon was very much surprised because he didn't understand. Did Dylan really have a secret weapon? Catherine was also impressed and couldn't understand why he hadn't used it before. With each penetrating glance, they began to realize where this was going. The kid decided to use the reinforcement to the max. The young man took a closer look at it and realized that it was probably going to be hot. The boy continued to accumulate mana, realizing that this was about to be the real max boost, after which he decided to also apply Soul Stream Release.
Pet the cat.